Hello, everyone. We think we're on. See, I never know if we're on because this is what happens.
Think we're on.
This is what happens because we started, but then I gotta wait for YouTube to catch up, and we have to see.
YouTube takes its time. I see it. I see us. I
see
us on there. We've got to be on.
Well, then we're on.
We do appear to be on.
Okay. Well, in that case,
it really looks like we are.
Hi. Hello, everyone.
Hello, and welcome to Roll for Combat Live.
Yeah, that's right. Where we are gonna talk to. No, hey, you're not No Nat. Where'd No Nat go?
I am not No Nat. No, I don't think everything's great. I do have some negative opinions on things.
That's right. That's right. We got a grumpy Gus on the show today.
I'll wear that. I'll accept that.
Hey man, well, we got to bring everyone on. We need different opinions. We can't all be rainbows and unicorns every week, right?
That's correct. Someone has to keep you guys in check. Although, again, as I said before, the best rating I've ever given was to your book. So,
And by the way, that is not sponsored. I didn't even know you were going to do it. It's
Nope.
like I was sitting here, and then all these orders were coming in, and I'm like, something happened today. I don't know what it was, and then I'm like, oh, they reviewed our book. Very nice, thank you.
Yeah.
And they liked it.
Yeah. Bob, a member of our team, is just a huge monster fan, and we did a review where he was very excited about Monsters of Myth. Not quite understanding that it was a Lost Omens book, not really a bestiary.
Yeah.
And we did a review, and he was kind of critical of it, and we got a lot of flack from it. And so then he was like really excited for your book, and then your book like exactly delivered what he wanted, right? Which was these like big bad monsters with really cool abilities and awesome sort of flavors with interesting mechanical things that really kind of fit the bill for what he wanted. And so we were all just really excited. And then for me personally, and for my other co-host Aaron, we were just very there was a lot of elements in that book that we really think are missing from a lot of monster design. And so we really liked I'm an unabashed fan of 4th edition D&D, and I like a sort of very game-based design in a lot of these monsters, where it's like you can clearly see what this monster is designed to fill a role, and it has the mechanics and the abilities to do that. So
yeah, and even some of the things where you were saying that the spellcasting monsters still had too many spells, I agree with you on that. Like, I just think spellcasting monsters in general, the ones that have prepared or spontaneous and go all the way down, just have too many.
Yeah,
and the only reason that we even did that is just like in general for PF2 is that like the response from people in general was that like, no, the Lich should have all of them because it's a wizard, right? And it's like,
yeah, I'm right there with you. It
just makes it harder to GM that monster because it has all of these spells that you're probably not going to use. It's harder to build it because you have to think, what first level spells am I going to give this high level monster, and so on. Right. So I'm right there with you on that, but it is the standard, and so therefore that for some monsters you got to do it.
Right. But I am glad I'm happy to be here and excited to talk about third-party products and all that.
Maybe people should know who you are. Who are you, Derik?
Well, who am I? Well, I just assumed. No. So my name
Everyone knows Derik.
My name is Derik Malenda. I am the host and GM for the Knights of Last Call. We're a YouTube channel that focuses predominantly on Pathfinder 2, but we really cover a lot of RPGs, especially basically almost everything not 5th edition, which isn't to say that GM advice isn't good GM advice, but we're really passionate about gaming as like a philosophy and as sort of an art form, not just as a game product. So we do a lot of videos and a lot of live streams, and check us out. It's youtube.com/Knights of Last Call.
Knights of Last Call. So why is it Knights of Last Call, not Knights of the Last Call? Sort of like Knights of the Dinner Table.
Is it like the Knights of Last Wall? And it's a
play on Knights of Last Wall, but instead, we got together to drink. So last call, as in having a big foaming.
My guess is right.
You are correct. That is correct. So we're inherently tied to it, and we wanted some sort of funny pun, some sort of double entendre, but that was the one that we liked, and I thought it was a cool idea. So there also used to be a talk show called The Last Call or something like that with Carson Daly, and so it's kind of a nod to that as well. So
you called Roll for Combat a stupid name, so I'm gonna say that Knights of Last Call is a stupid name. There you go.
You would be correct. It is a stupid, silly name.
I'm going to say both of the names are silly, but they're
Okay.
memorable, and so they're doing their job.
Well,
That is true. That is true.
Here's the thing. So when I first started this, you know, I had to do a lot of SEO and checks, and obviously, you know, everyone's like, "Oh, it's roll for initiative," and it's. I mean, I'm in advertising for a living, and so you know, I had to do a lot of research, and you got to be able to get the name and then make sure there's a lot you have to do to get a really good name. So roll for combat, it's easy to say, it's easy to spell, it's, you know, there's a lot, it hits a lot of targets, and also the URL was available, and people are like, well,
Also a big deal.
Yeah, and it's like well, you don't say roll for combat. I'm like, well, you could turn anything into something, and it's funny, people start saying it now. I mean, now I say both, because after a while you just, you know, if you use it long enough, you just start using it. And I actually like it more than roll for initiative myself, so it just sort of turns into something.
You're a little biased.
You're
I
kind
am
of biased.
biased.
I prefer roll for initiative because it's not assuming that you're going to fight.
Oh,
and
we're
I like
always in
doing
combat.
non-battle
Yeah, but
solutions.
we
would be
fight.
bad.
We fight.
I will give you the advantage for roll for combat over roll for initiative, because I've said many times. Not that I have a problem with cyclical turn-based combat order, but rolling for initiative for me is always like one of the most anticlimactic moments in a fight, because
Right.
you're like, everyone's really excited, the monsters break in, and then there's this very like bookkeeping kind of bureaucratic process while everybody sort of, you're like doing the, you know, merge sorts and heap sorts as you're trying to figure out who goes first and what goes first. So
it's like in the PlayStation RPG where the screen kind of shatters and it says loading
Right.
for a few seconds, and then
go.
you suddenly wind up on a battle screen.
that's exactly right. So
yeah. Well, names are hard, man. Coming up with a good name is hard.
yeah, I spent way too much time trying to come up with the name, and at the end of the day, like you said, if you're good and the stuff is popular, it'll become its own brand anyways, and so people stick to it. So
I always like that. My favorite story of that, it's a little different though, is that when I was a kid, people would pronounce data like data, and it was either data or data. It was either one. And then Star Trek came out, and they actually had to ask Patrick Stewart, how are you going to pronounce his name? And he said data. And it's been that ever since. In fact, there was a time before Star Trek that people would say data. And because of Star Trek, now people say data, and that is conical.
I heard data also sometimes.
Or data, right.
Yeah.
Like there was 3 ways to say it.
Nerd alert. There is in a very early season 2 episode of Star Trek The Next Generation when Dr. Pulaski calls data.
Right.
And he says data, and she goes, what? And he goes, data, what's the difference? And he goes, one is my name, the other is not. And
there you go.
And so yeah, that was actually I was like, oh, okay, it's data, I better say it that right.
Yeah, so that's the thing. You can turn something into something if you're good enough.
That's right.
You can turn it into a meme or the standard, if you will. So yes, anyone who's watching, if you have questions, we'll get into a little while, which is a interesting topic because Mark published something about this on Reddit a couple days ago, and oh boy, there was a lot of responses.
Yeah, there was at least a couple hundred upvotes. I saw,
and there were a couple hundred responses.
Yeah, it's
we got a couple
crazy.
hundred upvotes on like the Dragon preview, but not as many responses. It was
not
a big
as many
discussion.
responses. So also, for those of you curious, later I will do a little preview of what we're doing with Ginny D. So it was released and announced indirectly because Ginny D put out her ad that Ginny D is the guest author and she came up with her own dragon. And tomorrow I am actually going to publish the video of myself, Mark, and Ginny talking about her dragon. It's like a 45-minute video, and it is really, really good. Wow, is Ginny D an amazing design? Like, just kind of was stunned how good her dragon was. And the dragon book should come out tomorrow. I know it's actually ready, but I'm waiting for 2 pieces of art because I need more art. It's like just not enough dragons. It's actually a 2-page spread. It's not even just a piece of art. It's like a 2-page piece of art, and then it'll be out, and I can sleep 1 week. I laid out this whole book in 1 week, and it was a long week last week. Let me tell you.
Wow, you do your own layout, huh?
I do everything. Yeah, I
Okay,
do.
all right.
I mean, he doesn't do everything.
I do everything. Mark is
No.
nearly an AI that I created.
That's right. He pays me just to be here so that you get the Mark Cypher name.
That's
He
right,
did
right.
everything.
That's right.
Right. He just bought you
No.
for the brand
I actually
name.
killed the real Mark Cypher. This is well, it's like Data. You know, I've been fooling around with Cybertronics, and you know, this is
Right.
my result. No,
Oh, man, we're nerdy. That's bad.
Let's see. I do the editing. I do the layout. I do the art direction.
Very cool.
I
Do you
do-
use Adobe Suite?
Oh yeah. I use InDesign.
InDesign and stuff?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Cool.
Yeah. So, I mean, I was trained in this. I mean, it's one of these things like I have training in design, interactive design and layout. And so when I was looking for people, it's really, 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 really hard to find people to do good layout for books in the RPG space.
Sure.
And I actually have a lot of people work with me, and they're good. They actually can do layout, but they don't know the industry, and they, you know, like they wouldn't know if a stat block is wrong or, you know, things like that, because they just don't know what they're laying out.
Right.
So
it's this confluence of things that you're looking
Yeah.
for. That can be very challenging. Like we were like trying to find someone maybe to do like producing for us, and we're like, well, ideally they would know a lot about OBS and live
Right,
stream and
right.
technology and cameras, but also like no gaming and no RPGs. And so I can only
Yeah.
imagine. So when in doubt, do it yourself. That's actually awesome. That's good to hear.
Yeah. I don't mind it too. I mean, it's actually kind of fun. So I just wish I you know, didn't have to go to Gamma the week before, because then I had to do the whole thing in 1 week instead of 2 weeks. So I had to squeeze 2 weeks of work into 1 week. So it was pretty bad.
Are you guys planning on being at Origins or Gen Con?
Oh God, yeah, I go everything. I'm going to PaizoCon. Mark will probably be at PaizoCon.
Yeah,
most
it should
likely.
be. It really depends on whether or not they find out that there are tickets, right? Because I was on
I got
Paizo
tickets.
staff.
I got
What?
tickets for you.
Oh,
I
you
got-
got extra?
yeah, I got a ton of tickets. so-
Okay, because at the time that the PaizoCon was where they're rolling over, I was on Paizo staff, so of course I didn't have a ticket that year.
Yeah, I'm going to PaizoCon. Actually, a lot of Roll for Combat will be at PaizoCon. Like most, if not all of us, will be there. And I go to Gen Con every year. I've never been to Origins, but actually, a lot of Roll for Combat lives in Ohio, and they go. I hear
Right.
it's great, but it's actually at a bad time for me. June's a bad time.
Yeah. I mean, for many years, I mean, I went, I think like the last one when it was up in Wisconsin. But then I've been to every indie one since, but Origins is in my backyard. It's like a 2-hour drive. So
Yeah.
so it's a fun little con. It's like, you know, Gen Con Junior. If you miss the old Gen Con, like when you could like, you know, breathe in the
Mhm.
dealer hall and you could like, you know, actually get into an event, then Origins is nice.
Well,
I went to
last-
Origins once for Paizo, and it's got a really great crew of people who are like running games and throwing events there. I definitely did think that the way they did the event book was like really weird the time that I went. It was like, if you think from a computer science perspective, like what's the most inefficient way you can build this book where it just like repopulates every duplicate event as a separate event and then just gets bigger and bigger. That is how it was built, and it was kind of confusing and hard to find things for that reason. But like the people who were running events, like all the events were great, and like you said, you could breathe, you could go, you could see things that were there.
I mean, Gen
Yeah.
Con last year, there was no one there. It was great.
Well, yeah, that's
Well,
kind of
sure.
yeah, that's an exception. That's
it was actually amazing because
I bet it was.
It was.
Oh,
I had pictures. I was like, "There's no one here." I mean,
Yeah, we rolled over our badges from 2019 or 2020 when, you know, it got canceled full out, and they rolled it over to 2021, and we said, okay, we'll take them. And then we just canceled the last minute. We just didn't feel like safe and everything like that, and we just didn't go. And then everyone was like, it was beautiful. It was amazing, you know.
it was.
And everybody was like really
It was
like
so good.
loving it because they said with no Fantasy Flight, with none of the big huge, even Paizo, like none of these big huge footprint booths. It was just all indie publishers and smaller press publishers, and
Yeah,
just sounded like it was a really good time.
it was good. And let's see, I go to PAX Unplugged because that is an excellent convention. That's in my backyard because that's in Philly. And I sometimes go to PAX Boston. The thing is, it's also at a bad time. It's like in a few weeks. April's bad time for me. Basically, April and June are bad for me because baseball starts and I got to go to baseball games. That's actually only semi-true. Believe it, that's only half true, but it is true.
But there's not that much tabletop presence at PAX
No,
East.
that's
like
video, it's all
I
video
used to go
games.
to it
It's
when we
all
were at
video
MIT
games.
just because that was in our backyard to run events.
It's also that is a
Pathfinder.
really, you want to talk about a crowded con? That might be the most crowded con I've ever seen.
It's very crowded.
It's really
but
bad.
PAX Prime is also very crowded.
I've never been to PAX Prime. I hear it's
or I guess
good,
it's
though.
PAX Northwest now, or
Well,
whatever it is.
Yeah. And I've never been to Dragon Con, which I hear is really awesome too. I've never been there.
Yeah, that's always on my list. That's one in Atlanta, right? Or
Yeah.
Yeah, that's Atlanta.
Yep, that's another monster one. But yeah, I mean, I always go. Well, the ones I always go to Gen Con, always. Period. Even if I'm like I can only go. I've had like vacations and then like you can only go one day. I'm like, well, then I'm going one day. I will fly out there and be there for 14 hours and fly home. Like that's how much I love Gen Con. PaizoCon is also my favorite just because it's so small and there's a lot of fun and a lot of drinking. I know Mark doesn't drink, but it's still fun.
I don't.
I know.
But
Did
it's
you
still
party
there's a
with
lot
us,
of
though?
there's a good number of like just people who
Yeah,
are
it's good.
like in the industry that
good.
come
That's a good
there and
con.
you can talk to staff members a lot more easily than in most other cons.
Yeah,
And-
I've never been to that. The closest
So
experience
good.
I've ever had to that is like I went to Winter Fantasy a couple times.
I've been to Winter
And-
Fantasy. That's
yeah,
an
and I
excellent
went-
convention.
Yeah, and it's so small and so little, but it's
Mhm.
like I don't know, 50%. Like I was there during like the 5e playtest period when Monty Cook was still attached,
Wow.
and I like played in his table, one of his playtest groups in the afternoon, and then we all ended up like going over to Jimmy John's and like getting sandwiches together and like just kind of talking about the
Wow.
development process. So that was actually really cool, like those really small, intimate cons. So
Mhm.
I like both. I think there's advantages to both, but that's cool.
Yeah.
I'm excited to go to Gen Con. I didn't go last year. And I didn't go the year before that, obviously, because it got completely canceled. So I'm excited to,
It's going to be
make it
nuts
happen.
this year because they.
This is going to be my first year after 2 years off too. So
Yeah.
I'm in your boat. Steven was one of the ones who went last year.
Yeah,
Wow.
Steven goes to all of them apparently.
I'm also
so.
insane.
No, Steven even went the year that they canceled it. He just went by
I did.
himself
I did.
and he waved a
I
Gen Con
love it.
flag down there.
I love
Gen Con.
Indy. I love it.
I love Indy
that city.
too. The food.
Yeah, when
It
they
was
started bringing in the
really
food
good.
trucks, that was such a smart idea. And just so many good restaurants downtown, and I love it. I think it's a great
I
city.
love Indy. I love it there. And also Gen Con is just there's something nice about just everyone there is there to play games and everyone's
Yes.
friendly and it's just nice. It's really
Yep.
just a wonderful place to be. Everyone there is in a good mood. Everyone there is like talking about gaming or, and the fun thing is I'll walk around and you'll see like, I'll never forget this. I saw some game. It was like one of those huge games and they had these little airplanes, like, World War II fighter planes. And
Sure,
they were on those like extenders.
The telescoping
Right,
extenders.
the telescoping center, so you could see them. And I'm like, I don't know what this game is, but there was tons of them. And then I saw someone walk up, and then everyone at the table saluted and gave him a salute. And I'm like, this is why it's so cool, man. It's like, well, I don't even know what this is, and everyone's into it. And it's just like everyone is in the best mood when they go to Gen Con.
Absolutely. I mean, best 4 days in gaming, right? Is like the tagline.
It
So
is. It is.
And for me, it's like I might look at a game and say, I don't have any interest in playing that, but your enthusiasm for it and the excitement that you have for getting to play this game is very infectious to me.
Yep.
And everybody goes there for a different reason. I mean, part of the reason I used to go to Gen Con was to do the puzzle hunt, and I would spend an inordinate amount of time doing the puzzle hunt every year. And some people said that's stupid. Why are you wasting your time doing that? I don't know, because that was fun for me.
Yeah,
There's something for
you.
everyone. And I like hanging out with people and absorbing the energy from Gen Con. I have to admit that the dealer hall kind of overwhelms me at Gen Con. It's too much in a variety of ways for me to be able to process it. So it winds up not being ideal for me. Just like there's a lot of people, so you kind of have to be sure about what you're doing, or you will either be blocking them or get moved along. And then there's so many like lights and colors and things coming from everywhere that like one of the hardest tasks that I would have in a given year at Paizo is that the designers, but nobody else, would be told, you go roam the hall for like an hour or two and like find things. And I could not find anything, like pretty much ever,
because you gotta hang out with me, man. When you hang out with me, I'm like
when there's too many things.
Oh, I know.
Like it's not finding a needle in a haystack; it's finding a hay in the haystack.
Yeah, it's a lot,
like,
and it is very crowded.
It is.
It can get very crowded in there, it could be a little bit, especially people with their gigantic roller backpacks or whatever, and it's just
I eventually realized that my only chance in like my last few years that there was one that I was at Paizo is that I pre-researched a bunch of stuff that was supposed to be coming out at Gen Con, and I was like, okay,
actually, Mark,
these ones look like they're going to be I spent several hours pre-researching, and then I would go to that place and I would that's about it.
No, that's smart.
Actually, here's the secret. I figured out the secret, Mark, because I know what it is, and then we'll get into the topic. So I'm pretty short. I'm extremely wide. If I was a football player, if I was a foot taller, I would be a linebacker. I'd be gargantuan, but I'm a tiny linebacker. I'm this little tiny guy with gigantic shoulders. You're short too, Mark. I don't know how big you are, Derek, but I'm not exactly very tall. And so when you go into that dealer hall, you're like an ant. I mean, like there's some big people in that dealer hall, and they're carrying around those big backpacks. And as you said, so I usually go in the dealer hall. I bring Mark. I bring Rob Tremarco with me, who's 6'6" and like 350 pounds. I bring like Seth with me, who's 6'6". I bring like Chris Beamer, who's like 6'4". I bring all these gargantuan guys with me. So they
bring a offensive line.
They
Napoleon strategy. You bring a bunch of very large advisors with you.
That's right. It works. It works. You got to.
I think I would still, even if there weren't many crowds, I would still just be overwhelmed by how many things there are, and have choice paralysis if I didn't pre-research ahead of time.
Analysis paralysis.
They all look so cool. It's not like because nothing looks cool. It's like no, everything looks cool. I don't know.
I just buy. Look at me. I buy everything. I have another shelf coming. You see that shelf?
Look,
full. I got another one. I'm gonna fill that one up.
I mean, Steven, I sort of do that. My other strategy, other than pre-researching, is I just walk up and down every aisle.
I do that.
That's
too.
what I do.
Yeah.
I
so
like Thursday. I do 000 through 050, and then I do 060 through 1000. And I do that. And I like earmark things that I think I might come back. And then like on like Saturday or Sunday, that's when I go in and I try to make deals. I get backfired sometimes because things sell out, but
see, you can earmark things. I do it. I go through all of them, but I don't earmark anything because it all looks good.
Yeah, well, you got to make some choices.
Yep.
So don't forget, if you have a question and you want it answered immediately, and Derek knows this, you super chat, and boom, goes right to the top, and we will answer it. Anything you want. Doesn't mean we have to give you a true answer. If you ask us something personal, we can make something up. But if you ask us a question, such
as Steven's answer that he has 3 black belts, so he would win in a fight between us.
That is true. That's not fake. I took karate for 20 years. I have one in Tung Soo Do, I have one in Taekwondo, and I have one in Tiger Schulman. So
I didn't say it was fake. I said it was your answer.
Okay.
I have a 3rd degree in Taekwondo.
Really? Okay. Now Derek and I would probably lose. One of us would lose bad. Actually, that's interesting. I never got 3rd. What happened is I kept moving, and I did Tung Soo Do in Pittsburgh when I was at Carnegie Mellon. And now it's actually the headquarters for Tung Soo Do. And then I did Kung Fu, not Taekwondo. I did Kung Fu when I moved back to New York. And oh my God, I loved Kung Fu. Was awesome. I loved Kung Fu. And then when I moved to the city, I did Tiger Schulman because it was like 2 blocks from me. And then I blew out my left knee. I've broken a lot of things, but I actually have blown both of my knees, and after that I stopped. So
my only chance against your 3 black belts is to take advantage of your 2
go for the knee.
Blown out knees.
He's got a bad reflex DC. Go for it.
I just had surgery on my knee. You're right, but you could. But if I punch you even once,
so I just run and hope that you're with your knees down. That you can't.
That's funny.
What are you gonna say, Derek?
Oh, I was just saying that's very funny. But yeah, I did it when I was a kid, though.
okay.
So like I stopped when I was like 16 or 17,
okay.
and gave it up for
I loved it.
hockey and racquetball. So
I did both of those too. I did hockey.
Yeah, I never
tore up similar things. I like to get the crap kicked out of me. It's fun.
Oh, I'm not good at all, but you know.
Okay, I was decent.
I mean, like I play hard. I mean, let me put it this way: I tore my labrum playing racquetball. So
me too. Right here, I just got surgery on it last year.
Yeah, I got surgery a couple of years ago, but I have 4 anchors in my right shoulder. So
ooh, that I don't have. I just have. They just cut it. They're like, oh,
they just cut it open.
Yeah, it was like partially torn. Click.
Oh yeah, I had a full slap tear, and they had to.
That's bad. That's bad.
Anyways, but that was from going too hard at racquetball.
Anyhow, why do D&D players love third-party content more than Pathfinder players?
Okay.
Here's actually why you came here. Here we go.
Can I start with a question?
Yeah, go right ahead.
Do we know that that's true?
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, we don't necessarily have 100% that we did a representative survey out to people or anything like that, but there's enough evidence out there when you look at the sales and popularity of DM's Guild, and you look at the third-party Kickstarters, that I think that it's pretty conclusive.
That is my take on it as well. I'm not disputing that. I just didn't know if there was like something came out that like made you like, you know, have some evidence specific.
Well, I'll tell you my evidence. My evidence is that one, I've talked to Paizo and other people in the industry. And the other thing is that Cobalt Press, who I'm very friendly with, and they were well known for putting out a lot of stuff for Pathfinder and 5e or D&D, and they stopped. They don't put out anything for Pathfinder at all. They only do D&D. They only do 5e. And I spoke to them and they said, why? And they're just like, it's just not worth it. And they said, you know, that they can put out, you know, the audience is just too big. The 5e audience is just way too big. It's no contest, especially in their market where they're doing Kickstarters. And also, here's the other problem, is that retailers will carry 5e, no question, if you're looking to put your books in the stores, but you have to, it's a hard sell for them to take a Pathfinder book. And you put all that together for, you know, a professional third-party publisher like them, and, you know, they don't even bother with Pathfinder. And now, you know, you look at the Kickstarters, and every day there's another 5e Kickstarter.
Yep.
And I can count on one hand the number of Pathfinder 2e Kickstarters, including mine, that have been launched in 2.5 years, 3 years.
So, Stephen, you hit on one of the reasons that I think that for our main topic, why 5e players love third party more than Pathfinder second players already, and just in your explanation of the fact that we know that they do, which is size. Size is very, very important, just because even if the same percentage of players like third party in both, which I think is not the case, but even if it was, 5e's larger size is important, because if you get X% of the 5e base versus X% of the Pathfinder second edition base, that is a larger number of people. And when you come looking at sunk costs like art, like anything else that you have to do and printing the books, you're going to wind up seeing that you can make a profit, that you can put out more third-party content, that you can get higher quality art, purely, even if it was the same percentage, based on the fact that 5e is a larger number of people to start out with. And so that can have an effect that grows. I think that's one of the reasons.
Yeah, I mean, I know that when we started our channel and people started liking us, digging what we were talking about, one of the things I'd always get messages from YouTube, it's like, hey, you guys are great. When are you doing 5e? You know, and it wasn't like that. It wasn't like it's not like Pathfinder people didn't like us. They did. It's just there's so many more 5e players out there. The base is just so unbelievably big, like in a way that it's very difficult even for me. You know, I've been playing games and stuff like that in this, you know, for 30 years. And it's like, I go to stores, I go to, you know, not just game stores, but just anywhere, like a local arcade bar or something. And I'm just like, why are there people playing D&D here? Like it still blows my mind. And it's just such a huge audience.
Yeah. I mean, that's the big part of it, is that D&D is gargantuan, and, you know, it's hard to argue with that. And, You know, the thing is that, and you know, for better for worse, I love Pathfinder. I won't get into. I mean, I have a lot of issues. I like you. I love fourth edition D&D. I played a player character from level 1 to 20, and I had a great time playing. You know, fourth edition. 5e is fine in short bursts. I don't mind it in little one-offs and stuff. I don't think I could play a 5e adventure path personally because I like crunch and I like the mechanics of Pathfinder way more. But you know, I decided to come out with the Kickstarter, and I was originally going to do Pathfinder and then do the 5e Kickstarter, but working on the Pathfinder Kickstarter, Mark knows, was so much work that I'm like, screw it, we're just doing both at the same time. And we did both at the same time, and with almost, you know, the amount of 5e publicity I did was probably 20% of the Kickstarter, and the Pathfinder was 80%. And the numbers were basically 50-50, which is stunning.
And no knock to you guys, we thought the 5e rendition of the bestiary was great, but you know, how many of those Pathfinder Kickstarters do you see and then they just slap that 5e compatible sticker on there, because it's like you got to make some effort to appease it, because it just seems silly to not, you know, try to tap into this gigantic audience, which, you know, maybe we'll get into this reason, but for whatever reason is so thirsty for content. And
well, I think that's a good transition into what I consider as another big reason, which is the thirst for content. And you guys even mentioned it in your review for the 5e version of Battle Zoo Bestiary, that there's not as much content in 5e. There just isn't. They don't put it out at the same rate as Paizo, not even close to the same rate. And so people who are looking for more content, more customization, characters that don't feel pretty similar to each other after a few times, well, what's the place you go to next? Even if the Pathfinder rulebook line put it out at the same, like that's already putting it out faster than D&D does. But even beyond that, you might go to the Pathfinder Lost Omens line to get more customization before you go to a third party line, because there's multiple Paizo lines, each of which is pretty amazing.
I mean, I'll give you an example. I run a damn channel, and I just finished up reading through cover to cover, you know, finally got through Secrets of Magic. I haven't even really tapped into Guns and Gears yet, to be honest with you, you know, like, and before that's going to be done, we're going to have Book of the Dead out, and then there's going to be Dark Archives. And it's like, there's probably going to be 3 other books in there that I didn't know about, 4 more AP adventures. Right. Like I'm reading Quest for the Frozen Flame now. Like there's just so much content coming out of Paizo, and it's thick, it's deep, it's rich, it's dense. You know, 5e, it's like, I don't know, like a lot of the Unearthed Arcana stuff isn't, I don't know, it's not what I would really call a release. I don't think it's what a lot of people would call a release. And it, you know, one of our complaints used to be when we used to go to Gen Con, and like during the 4E era, because like the GSL was so like restrictive, and like before PF1 came out, like we would get upset because we're like, we came here with all this money and we want to buy things, like as opposed to like the 3E OGL era where you could buy like 800 Mongoose Publishing books and 800, you know, AEW books or whatever. And there was a million different things. And yeah, maybe some of it was crap, but you wanted to spend money. And you, with D&D, it's like, you guys won't let me. I can't. And so the third party publishers have stepped in.
Well, by the way, we have a question here. Jason B contributed $10 and wrote, Mark, how could you?
I responded, how could I what? And there's no answer.
Okay, well, Jason B, write us back, and he'll say how he could, because he could.
How I could. I could, but I just don't know what. But you know, I think Unearthed Arcana, which you mentioned, Derek, is another interesting factor that may contribute, because when you were saying like it's sort of not a release, but it is something that Wizards puts out that's like sort of known to be in an experimental form or like a maybe form that gets the fans who are interested into that looking at, hey, I'll take a look at this, like this thing that is not like a full book, and it's like it's not necessarily completely as baked as something that they put out in the final book.
It like conditions the audience to expect half-baked things.
Well, I'm not even, and I'm not even saying that third-party stuff is half-baked.
No,
I'm just
I'm
saying
not
that-
either.
I'm
but-
saying that in some cases the audience might be conditioned to expect like super high values of like on all the art and the creation of things and everything like that.
Yeah.
So if the audience knows that one of the ways they can receive things
Yeah.
do not have this very high expense, very, very high value, always in print, and that from the official source, it can condition them towards the idea, hey, maybe I should look at something also that someone else put out that doesn't have all of those same things associated with it, because it might be awesome, like the other Arcana might be.
Yeah, because I don't even think Paizo could honestly get away with doing like an Unearthed Arcana type release, right? Like, and again, this is my experience as like an outsider. I see people get upset at imbalances in the playtest releases, right? Like, how could you guys possibly release this? This thing clearly isn't working. And it's like, it's a playtest.
That's why
and
it's a playtest.
And people get still, it's like the audience of PF2, I think, is very, very refined and what they expect. And
so that's a part of another reason, I think. But I do want to touch on what you said, because that's a whole other topic about playtests. I think it's because of the way video games use betas and playtests, where it's like, we're basically done, and we know that you know that we're not going to change anything major in a video game when you get the early release. But if there's bugs, we'll fix like a few bugs. Whereas when a tabletop RPG gives you a playtest, it's like, oh no, we'll throw out anything that that is the problem here. And people, it's not the kind of playtest they're released to. They're expecting to get. But I think we should touch on the idea of the expectation of very high level of balance and for PCs and encounter balance, because I think that is actually something that, whether or not it's true that third-party publishers don't hit that or as much as the first-party publishers, which I think people have differing opinions on it. I don't want to try to litigate that. I think that the idea that Pathfinder 2nd Edition, because of the fact that it has a very tight encounter building system that's generally pretty accurate. When it says it's severe and you might TPK, you actually often might TPK if you don't come at it very strategically. If it says it's low threat, but still, then it usually can still do something, but it's probably not going to kill everybody, etc. Right. In 5e, I mean, obviously there's a new encounter building guideline that came out in a later book. So at the very least, I don't want to say anything about any of the other systems, but at the very least, Wizards felt that they had a better way to do the encounter building system than the one that was in the original Dungeon Master's Guide, because they did another one later. Yeah. And so there were some number of years between Xanathar's and the original that one was out. They didn't have Xanathar's yet, which, whether or not you agree that it's better, I don't want to get into that here either. But during that time, like, the encounters were not necessarily meant to, and it even says in the Dungeon Master's Guide, it's like, it's more of an art to balance encounters. These are not necessarily going to give you a balanced encounter. So the target was large to hit, because encounters already were not necessarily going to be balanced. So then almost whatever you would put out in third party would probably hit that larger target. Whereas in Pathfinder 2nd Edition, the idea is it's balanced in a way where you can expect what you're going to get. And if the third party is off, that's off.
Yeah. And I think there's a lot of subtlety to the system that, one of the things that a couple of my co-hosts and I have often talked about is, like, we would have loved to have seen. Do you remember, like, when at the end of 3.5 they came out with that rules compendium, and it had all, like, the sidebars explaining why the rules were the way they were? We always said, like, we always thought it would be really interesting to get something from, like, you or Jason and just have, like, an essay on why certain decisions were made in Pathfinder 2, sort of like the rationale behind why certain decisions were made, because I think some of the subtlety and some of the balance is actually kind of hidden in the system. And maybe that's something that you wanted folks to have to, like, discover and tease out for themselves. But to that end, what you were talking about, I think a lot of people that are when they play Pathfinder 2, they go, boy, if someone comes up with a feat that gives a +2 bonus to something, you're like, this could theoretically fundamentally completely underwhelm the game and overwrite it. And not to mention all the traits and, the interactions and the activities and the proper tagging of things. And I think it's just a lot more work to just design for Pathfinder 2. And, you know, if I'm going to put in a lot of work and effort, and it's not, I mean, if it's a labor of love and passion and you enjoy the game, I think that's great. But if you're looking at it strictly as a time value proposition, and you're like, I feel like it's almost more difficult to design for the game because of those exacting standards, and perhaps an audience which demands more tightly balanced, more precisely, you know, controlled quality. And I'm going to get, I don't know, 1/10 of the sales or 50% of the sales or whoever knows what. Why would I do that?
And if you get 1/10 of the sales or whatever, or 50, like that would be like if you could get the same amount of people, the same percentage, right? Because D&D we know is huge. It's a huge segment of the market. And so I want to touch on another thing you said, because I had a list to start off, and you bingoed into another one that I was going to talk about. I have a slightly different take, but it's mostly complementary to what you said. Whereas I believe that making your own content for your game is easier in Pathfinder 2nd edition because of the tools that were provided are more comprehensive for GMs, and the fundamental math and other things of the system are exposed, where just even a novice GM can see, and we tell you in the game mastery guide, look, this is how you build a monster, this is why you build it this way, and some of the other building things that is easier to do. But in a complementary direction, just like you said, making something that's for everyone that they're going to buy, that has to be rigorous enough that it's not just, oh, well, you know, I'm making a homebrew sword for Betty, who's the barbarian in my game, and I know it's going to be fine for Betty to have this sword, but instead is like, no, this sword has to be fine for everybody.
Yep.
It's a higher standard. Not that it's harder from the tools that you have, but just because the target is hard to hit.
Yep.
Where in the exact flip side, for 5e, a lot of the math and other things are hidden from you to make it easier for players to pick it up. Like, it's not for no reason. Because of the way that certain components elements are hidden, it makes the game easy to pick up. It's part of the success of 5e. But that makes it somewhat harder to just start and homebrew something just from the get-go. But since the target is wider, someone who does put enough effort into it to go past that point can probably publish it for everyone.
Sure.
So that in that sense,
I buy that.
I think that it's what you said, but with just a slight nuance added to it.
Yeah.
Well, one thing, you guys have been talking a lot. One thing I want to say is that we didn't really touch on, okay, I get it. Players love third-party content because in my mind, 5e is like Play-Doh. Like, it is really easy to manipulate. You can make it do whatever you want. And Pathfinder is like a technical erector set. Like, it is very rigid in a lot of ways. It's extremely strong and the rules are excellent. But I would say, especially now that I've been developing for Pathfinder, and now Mark and I are working together, and I've, published with Paizo, when I get stuff either from freelancers or when I look at, like even the RPG Superstar contest, I'd say 97% of the time when we get something from freelancers, it is not balanced correctly and needs to be adjusted. Sometimes a little, but, it's just very, very, very hard, I think, to get that sweet spot for Pathfinder 2nd edition, which is the main reason why when I did Battle Zoo, as like I hired Mark and Ron and Patrick and
right.
Linda.
Not everybody can hire.
Yeah, but it's like but you needed that. Like, I needed people to know that this is going to be balanced. Like, this is going to work, and it's going to be done with literally the same people who write Paizo books are writing these books, and I think it worked. And for the 5e, I did the same thing. The group I got is the same ones who did Level Up for Ian World. And I tell you, they know 5e as well, if not better, than the developers of 5e. They know their stuff. So I made sure that I got, the best of the best, so that everything we put out is as good as first, party publishing. The problem is like, and this is my reason, like, why I don't use third-party publishing sometimes, is like, I can tell very quickly if something is broken, and I'm like, I can't use it. Like I read it, I'm like, oh, this is going to be broken. I can tell, and it might be cool and a good idea, but I either have to rework it, and again with 5e. When Mark and I first started working together, I remember Mark was worried about the monster part system, and you were like, well, I don't know how we can get it into the rules and make it balanced. And I wrote back and I said, there is no balance in 5e. Just do whatever you want.
I think that there is. I've now read through, I've analyzed. I think there is balance.
No, there is balance. But this was like a year and a half
their
ago.
Encounter building guidelines have shifted, and there's a lot of different expectations that are going along. But I think there is balance. It's just not necessarily as tight as
no, definitely
well,
not.
and I would also add to that. This is again my personal take from my time in the interwebs, but I also think that my impression of a lot of 5e GMs, even ones that I've met in person over the last couple of years, certainly pre-COVID, but either at local game stores or at gaming conventions, and maybe it's that critical role sort of mentality, but I think there's a lot more. I think there's a lot more GMs in the 5e space who are much more willing to, we'll call it fudge, an encounter or something like that. So if you put in a quote unquote bad monster from a book or something like that wasn't designed or balanced properly, it wouldn't matter if it was balanced correctly or not. The GM was going to kind of make the outcome be what they wanted it to be anyways. Mm-hmm. And my impression of a lot of Pathfinder 2 players, especially from my experience doing this YouTube channel, is a lot more of them play it closer to as rules is written, and a lot of people are much more into doing it the way that the book intended to be done, and so that's like a double pressure now to get it right, because it is a wider target in 5e, but when the GM is just pretending to roll the dice behind the screen anyways, it doesn't even really matter what the encounter balance is. So I think Pathfinder 2 unfortunately is the victim of its own success in that respect.
I think it is. I think it's like it's also a combination that they put out a lot more books. They put out a lot of quality books. They put out good books that people really want.
Sure.
So it's very hard, to come up with something that people want. And again, I mean, I go back to what I'm doing. I mean, quite frankly, between the fact that I used to work with Blizzard, monsters is what drives World of Warcraft and best video games and MMOs. So I knew monsters would work. I spoke to Derik Malenda a lot. He's like, monsters definitely. And I was like, okay, so that made that easy. And then Mark's the one who said dragons, and he was right. Mark is right about dragons.
Dragons are just like the ultimate monster, right?
And
so, but I want to talk a little bit about the dragons, because it leads us to a genre, and Derek and Steven just hit almost everything I was going to say about 5e and PF2, but dragons gets us into something that I want to talk about a little, because we talked about why 5e has more, but there's a few other reasons why PF2 has less that make it interesting to compare to Pathfinder First Edition in terms of third party as well. And dragons sort of plays into this story a little bit for me, because this is something I actually thought up at home, like right after the release of PF2. And I thought to myself that I kind of wanted to release a dragon ancestry, but I didn't think I could afford the art for it and not like necessarily lose money. But
you think
part of the reason I wanted to do that is because Pathfinder First Edition and to an extent 5e had this as well, thanks to DM's Guild being out much sooner than Pathfinder Infinite. Pathfinder First Edition had the advantage of 3.5 being pretty similar. So you had people like Owen with Super Genius that then became Rogue Genius was putting out like a product. Like it was very, I can't remember exactly how often it was. I think it was like every month that he put out like another class or some other big product. And a bunch of people that other people knew to check out, like Owen or things like that, just hit the ground running with third party, and rising tide raises all boats. So I was thinking, if I put something out, people might check it out because it's Mark Seifter, and that might help the entire third party scene. So I felt like a little obligated to do it, but I still didn't do it. And now I'm glad I didn't, I guess, because of the fact that the product we're getting is just so much more deluxe than what I would have been willing to pay to get in terms of art and certain other assets on it and size and scope. But I guess the fact of the matter is that the third-party market in Pathfinder First Edition, it started out stronger, which built up momentum. There's also was a kind of an issue where you have certain big third-party companies, and we're hoping Wolf for Combat and Battles will help with this in Pathfinder Second Edition as we're getting bigger. But there were bigger ones in the latter days of Pathfinder First Edition as well, even towards the end, that were putting up big, high-quality books, right? But you didn't see them transitioning over to Pathfinder Second Edition, or at least not as quickly. And part of the reason for that is because Pathfinder First Edition also had a wide target, but it was wide in a way where it was just like people were playing vastly different games from each other that were generally kind of balanced amongst themselves. Like there was the baseline, and then there were people who, because of all the trap feats and other options that allowed you to make a character that was a lot weaker than the baseline, had trouble with the baseline. And then there were the people who would just like, my character can easily solo the baseline. Even if you doubled everything that was in every encounter, I would solo it, because they were playing way above the baseline, and their groups and their GMs buffed the encounters, and they were having a fun, relatively balanced game at the very, very high level, high ranges of optimization that the baseline was not ever intended to meet, but they would find like the one thing that was broken by the baseline and therefore viable by the very high optimization. So the reason this is important is because of the fact that by the end of Pathfinder First Edition, some of the third-party companies started sort of like, you can't really cater to all of those. You can go to the baseline, right? But the people who are playing it very high up will only find the things that you messed up are the things that they want. Some third-party companies realize that, you know, there's a market of the people who want a book that's all the things that will work for their very high optimization game. The problem being that Pathfinder Second Edition brought it down to one baseline that everyone could play together.
Right.
And so the exact people who didn't often transition from Pathfinder First to Pathfinder Second, bounced off or stayed in Pathfinder First, were the ones who wanted to play a game where it was like, we are so much stronger than whatever the baseline is, whatever it was going to be, and our GM just buffs the encounters a lot. Or the similar version where we're much stronger than the baseline, our GM doesn't buff the encounters and we win in 1 second.
Yeah, no, I think that's actually a very valid point. And I saw there was a super chat, by the way, too, Stephen. But I'll get to that in a second. But if I have a critique, well, I have many critiques, but if I have a critique, if I have a critique about Pathfinder 2, it's because that baseline, you know, the analogy I used before is that like PF1 or 3 EOGL was like an 8-lane highway, right? Like you had the slow lane, you had the fast lane, and you had 8 lanes, and it was crazy and it's a mess. Pathfinder 2 restricted it down to just a couple of lanes. Now you have complete freedom within those lanes to do whatever you want to do, and it will work. But, you know, it's not the crazy mess that you used to have. There are times where, like you said before, you look at a situation or a class or a feat and you go, there really only feels like maybe there is one way to do this, because to do it any other differently would either be too powerful or too weak for what is that very strict baseline of Pathfinder 2. And so there are some times where you look at certain features or class abilities and you go, this seems familiar. I feel like I've seen this before. And it is. It's because it's sort of a repeated concept that you've sort of seen because you're constrained by the balance. And you can't create something that's broken, and you can't create something that's garbage and throwaway either, because that wouldn't fit the sort of design philosophy of getting rid of bad choices and getting rid of bad of you know, trap feats or overpowered feats. You know, there's no, like, even toughness in PF2 is a markedly better feat than it was in, you know, PF1. And so, you know, I feel like that in a sense kind of can constrain what you want to do. And some people might look at third-party products and say, there's nothing for me to buy here because it's not really going to offer me anything, you know, substantially different.
Well, I mean, I will say that if you're a good designer, I agree.
Most people aren't.
And most people aren't. I'd say that's 100% true. And it's very hard to design. I just think it's very hard to design for Pathfinder Second Edition well. Yes. I think it's hard to design. I think it's actually very easy to design for Pathfinder because they give you the rules and they show you the system and the math is all in front of you. But to do something unique and new is really
Right.
hard to
Unique,
do.
new, and balanced.
Yeah, it's
Very,
very,
very difficult.
very hard.
And-
And back to the super chat, which will bring me into our sneak preview.
Oh yeah, that's a great
Oily
segue.
Right, who gave us £5, which is real money, by the way. £5. Dragons.
Wait, is it a pound or a euro?
Oh, euro, even better. Sorry, euro. I misread that. Euro.
Yeah, that's like it's like a 120 to 1 conversion.
There we go. Real money. Dragons. What is your favorite? Non-chromatic or metallic? With that though, let's do a quick preview. Hey, look, a preview. Look, we're tiny. So yeah, the Dragon Ancestry book, which I know a lot of people here are like biting on the bit for, it's supposed to be out tomorrow. That's right, sometime tomorrow. It's actually ready. It's done. I finished it today, but I'm waiting for a piece of art. You see how big this art is? It's going to be a 2-page spread like this, and it is going to be the dragons battling a demon, and the demon takes up like the whole page. It is awesome, but I'm waiting for it. And here's the problem: when you have a book this big done by 3 people, me, Mark, 3.5 people, me, Mark, and the artist,
Ferhat Solheim.
right? You gotta wait for the artist to come back because I only got one artist. I'll say a half.
Honestly, he's doing a big piece like that way faster than I would expect anyone to do it.
Yeah,
too.
basically I did the math and we needed one more 2-page spread, and I gave it to him last week, and he said he'd finish it like by today or tomorrow. So as soon as I get that, we'll put out the book tomorrow, and then you can start playing with your dragons. And again, battlezoo.com, pre-order it. You will get it as soon as it's out. For Pathfinder, the 5e version will come out right after. We're already going to start working on it right now, and that will be out. And what was I going to say? Oh, yeah. So the other thing I was going to say while you guys think of your dragon is we did release our secret 45th dragon, and it's done by Ginny D, and I will release the video tomorrow. I actually don't have the video working because I had some technical
so you
issues.
Can't preview it?
I can't totally preview it. Here's a picture of it. Hey, look, it's a picture within
it's
picture.
a picture of a video.
It's a picture of a video.
It is a preview.
It's cute. Ginny D is so cute in this, and she is like doing the greatest, coolest dragon I could have imagined. Like it's her dragon came out amazing. It really came out really, really good. And you can see the whole video. It's like 45 minutes long. It'll come out tomorrow, and you can see Mark and I going through her dragon and her ideas. And then we're going to do a follow-up video where we present it to her and we show her what we came up with, even though it's already going to be in the book. We did like a temporary preview, like I showed her kind of what we did, but we didn't go through it in detail. And this is just the player version of the dragon. There will be a dragon version of the dragon, because you can play it both as a monster dragon as well as a PC, and she hasn't seen that yet. In fact, none of us has seen it because Mark hasn't written it yet, unless he did it on the side. I don't know about it, but he has to do that. And I'm not going to say what type of dragon it is just yet. I'll wait for the video comes out tomorrow. And but yeah, the video will come out tomorrow sometime. So subscribe to the channel. If you want to know when it is, hit the bell and get subscription, and then bing, you'll get a little notice saying, oh, here it is, Ginny D going through explaining the dragon. And with that, what is your favorite types of dragon, people? What is yours?
Well, I don't see. They said non-chromatic. In the chromatic sphere, my favorite dragon is probably the black dragon. I really love what Todd Lockwood did with it in 3rd edition. The sort of the skull, the horns. I think that's so awesome and great. And I love their shtick. Metallic dragons. I always love silver dragons. I love that they're so
most popular dragon.
I
like them too, and they won the most popular when I did a poll on Reddit to see what was the most popular. It was silver.
Yeah, but I always loved silver, and to a lesser extent bronze. I think are like the 2 most likely to sort of associate with humans and serve as mounts and polymorph into human shapes and sire half breeds and all that other stuff. So I just like the dragons that
but they said non-chromatic metallic.
They said non-chromatic, non-metallic.
You always go against the grain. He's like, Derek, give us non-chromatic, non-metallic. So what does he give us?
One of each.
One of each. Good job.
I don't remember what edition they were from, but they did. I guess it was probably from 2nd edition. The gem psionic dragons were pretty cool.
yeah, like the amethyst,
amethyst,
dragon,
topaz,
Yeah.
sapphire.
yeah, all the
Yeah, those were very
crystal
cool.
dragons,
Crystal,
or whatever they were.
Yeah, they
gem
were crystalline,
dragons.
the gem dragons, but they had psionic powers, and I always thought it was like very cool, very different. And I really, really liked that. And I really like, it's not really metallic and it's not really a thing. It was from, oh God, Monster Manual 4 from 3rd edition introduced this new way that you could build dragons. It was called like the game. It was like them trying to 4th editionize dragons by getting rid of the spell casting and really like leaning them more into their bestial modes. And there was like a template for the dragons that you could like convert them into sort of a more claw breath bite type dragon, and I always thought those were really cool. It's either Monster Manual 4 or Monster Manual 5 from,
was it like
from 3rd
feral or something like that?
I don't remember.
Something, it was something.
Ooh, there was a cool dragon, I think it's from Forgotten Realms Monsters of Faerun. It was called the Fang Dragon. That was
That Fang dragon was in there, and the Song dragon was in there too.
Very cool dragons.
So
Anyways,
real quick,
that's
All right, so what are yours, Steven?
No, wait,
Then
real
I'll
quick.
give mine.
Actually, someone just wrote. They ordered the Battles of Bestiary and Ancestries combo for Pathfinder 2nd edition and 5e. Wow, they went crazy. Well, let's see. Battles of Bestiary and the Dragon book for Pathfinder. Oh, a lot of things. Pathfinder, that's going to be out by tomorrow, and you'll get Battles of Bestiary immediately. Battles of Bestiary for 5e is done, so you'll get that immediately. And the Dragon Ancestries book, I'll be realistic. The PDF will probably be in about 6 weeks. Maybe 6 to 8 weeks.
The 5e one?
Yeah, the 5e one. It's like half done. The good news is like half the book is lore, so that part's done. And so we, it's just building, everything else, which is the other half. But we have a different team working on that, so that's not only Mark, thank God. So and they've been looking at it for a while. They read through the whole book. The same team's the one who also they edited the book, so they're familiar with it. We just have to go through and figure out how to build it.
It's those level up folks.
Yeah, it's the same level up folks. My favorites, well, I have an advantage because I read all the lore that Mark wrote, so the lore will help a lot. I mean, I love green dragons because they're just the nerds of the dragon world. Like, who doesn't love a nerd? And they're so much fun. I only play chaotic characters, either chaotic good or chaotic neutral, always. So
Steven's a Havoc Dragon.
The Havoc Dragon is like, the literal definition is they're insane. I'm like, yeah, there you go.
That's not the literal definition.
It's the literal definition.
No,
if you look up Havoc Dragon, it says insane next to it. That is right.
That's an insensitive description of them.
Okay, it's fine. They're not insane, but I mean like insane in the membrane, like the fun version of insane. I'm not being insensitive. I also like what's it, the Void Dragons, the ones that everything's like a telenovela.
That's lunar.
Lunar dragons. Yeah, lunar dragons. Actually, Void are cool too, but of course my favorites are the new ones we invented, the Wild Dragons, because
they were your idea, especially the Indigo.
The Indigo was mine, and then you and me came up with the other ones. But they are what makes them fun is because they were built as player characters, because they interact even as dragons with humanoids. Like, they as dragons interact with people. Like, they're not just standoffish. Like, they like to hang out and be with people. And in fact, that's a big thing. Like, the dragons as dragons and the dragons as PCs, you almost can't tell the difference because that's how similar they are. So they're just a fun, because it's never really been done. I just saw that. I was like, no one ever builds dragons just to hang out, like, and party with. And it's like, hey, let's invite Dragon Slinger over there, or Fire Eater. Why don't we bring him to the party? Like, oh, he'll eat everyone. We can't do that. But it's like, these guys will be like, yeah, sure. I'll probably bring like great food and drinks. He'll be an awesome addition to the party. So
there you go.
What are yours?
So mine, for the ones they didn't ask, are green and silver, exactly the same as Steven. But for the ones that they did ask, my favorite primal dragon is maybe Umbral, because they like to eat undead, so they could become an undead. They could become a chef by animating some undead and then eating them, like I did in the No Direction video about Book of the Dead. From Imperial, my favorite is Underworld, because
I love Underworld.
They kind of love alchemy, and it's pretty interesting. From Planar, my favorite are Bliss Dragons. They're just kind of cool. They're chilling out in Nirvana. From Esoteric Dragons, I like the Occult Dragon, aka Thaumaturge Dragon. They just collect so many items and they live among humanity even more than silver. So for the same reason Derik said for silver and bronze. And for outer, I like lunar because I decided that they think that people are a telenovela from the 2-sentence description in Pathfinder First Edition that just said they like to go to worlds and observe people. And I was like, okay, but why do they do that? It's because it's like their reality show. And then for wild dragons, the category that Steve and I came up with, probably maybe Harlequin dragons. They're kind of amusing.
Yeah.
And for the last category that Jenny D's dragon is in, the only one that we have is Jenny D's dragon. So it's the best one for now.
So back to the original topic, Cheese of Ages. Cheese of Ages, that's a good name. $5. Rather than super confining, I feel that there's sort of a system mastery barrier. And once you cross it, the system is far more free due to the rules. So
well, it is true that he's talking about Pathfinder Second Edition, or
yes,
they are. It is true that we designed it intentionally to be modular, and so that once you learn how something works, it kind of works the same way everywhere, so that you can find out a way to apply that rule. It's not like in previous, like in previous editions, there would be like turning undead. You have to look at the turn undead chart because it's just this own thing that is completely different than anything else. Mm-hmm. Or even Pathfinder First, where CMB and CMD just have their own calculations that are like, do you remember everything that goes into CMD? Like,
yeah. One of the things that we loved really early on, and again, it's a space that, and I talked about this in a couple of our videos where I said, like I love the idea that the NPCs would use diplomacy checks against PCs, against their will DC, and then actually modify their attitude, and so that they have to role play appropriately. But the idea that anything in Pathfinder 2 could be an armor class or a DC, right? Like you could make a longsword attack against someone's occultism DC, and like in the math of the game, that works. Because everything is on that same sort of chassis, and like when you realize
talisman to protect themselves against their longsword, and it shatters either way, and it's just
100%. Yep, exactly. And I once we realized that, very, very, very freeing and very, very cool. The idea that everything scales the same, everything works the same. You can basically just throw in and out any sort of numbers. Even one of my favorite things that I've really wanted to do, because I hate rolling dice as a GM, is I just want to convert everything that the monsters do to a DC, and everything that the players do to an attack, to a roll. So, I will attack the players with an attack DC, and they'll just make an armor class check, and defend using the armor class. It's basically the same thing in reverse. And we already do that, right? With like athletics DCs and, for grappling and stuff like that. So very, very cool.
Just remember to give a +1 to the things that you shift over,
because of the +10 -10 discrepancy, right?
Yeah. Well, because 10 plus is 11 plus would actually be giving an equal chance. Yeah.
Correct. But I even love it too, because people are like, well, how do you do critical hits? It's like, well, if you roll a nat 1, or if you roll 10 or under the DC of the attack, you got critically hit, and you take ×2 damage.
Yeah, absolutely.
Really well. Yeah, it's very, very cool, very elegant. But yeah, I'm actually I'm sure Bob is buying this Dragons book. I'm sure we're going to do a review of it, because he's probably really, really excited about this book. And I do like dragons, so it'll be interesting to see what the knights think of it.
Do whatever, say whatever you want. Don't worry, we're big boys. We can take it.
Oh, we will. Trust me. Like we have zero sponsors.
And you're proud of it.
We're proud of it. Right.
So I wanted to ask, what do you think? Obviously, I could do a whole show on the business reasons behind D&D when it first came out, and why they do DM's Guild and all that. Like, that could be 2 shows. So DM's Guild is one of the main reasons why, third-party content is so popular. The DM's Guild is so popular. There's more channels on YouTube about DM's Guild than there is about Pathfinder Second Edition. Like, it's kind of unbelievable how popular DM's Guild is, and that's like where people could officially publish, their content. And then WotC owns all of it, by the way, which is that's a bad trade, at least in my opinion. And now Paizo
Well, that's
launched.
why we're not on DM skills.
I know. That's why we're never will be.
Their rake on that is insane, right?
Yeah, it's 50%.
Well,
50%.
well, the store takes a good amount of that 50%.
Well, the store takes 30 and WotC takes 20.
Yeah, but I mean,
the
from
store
an
would have already taken
end user perspective,
Correct.
you're getting 50%.
Yeah, from an
Yes.
and you lose rights to everything you wrote.
But if you were going to sell on drive-through anyway, you would have only gotten 70%. So you're losing
75 or 65, 70 to 65, depending. It's 70 if you only sell there, and 65
yes,
if
or
you sell
65 if you
else.
wanted to sell somewhere else. So
Right.
going from 65 to or 70 or 65 to 50 is not quite as bad as going from 100 to 50 if you were already going to sell drive-through. But
Right.
yeah, they take a lot.
You know, the best business to be in is being the middleman. So,
but now we have Infinity. So do you think that, and it's doing pretty well? Like people, really
I was pretty
enjoy
critical of Infinity. So,
why were you critical?
Because, and this was actually something that came up in the Reddit a lot. It's actually something that did come up in our Patreon as well, which is a lot of people feel like the big problem with third-party products is I'm using Path Builder, I'm using Infinity or Nexus, I'm using Foundry, and none of this stuff, like Battles Through Best Fury, is very uncommon, right? That it's actually a part of some of these programs. Most stuff is not. And I want to just be able to drag and drop my feat. I don't want to have to even, God forbid I had to like type in my feat into the, Foundry compendium and then drag it onto my thing. Nope. I just want to be able to quick search, control plus, control space bar, type it in, drag it over. And I think a lot of people say that that's the way they play the game. And
yeah, that's true.
And I think that's a big reason for it.
Also, balloons come down. We've hit my last point that I had ahead of the time. I was just trying to flow it and only talk about them when it came up naturally, which is my last big point is that Path Builder, Foundry, and other implementations have just become more and more important. They were already important because of the fact that Path Builder came out, and unlike D&D had oh gosh, I'm blanking on the name right now. Demiplane did the thing for D&D, and it was Beyond.
Right,
they had Beyond, and they had that right away, pretty much.
Right.
Also they prevented anyone else from doing something like that. Already people were knowing that they weren't going to have third party in it, and it wasn't ubiquitous because it was pretty expensive, but it was a pretty strong product for the people who wanted it. With Path Builder being free and having the Paizo content, it became, I think, more ubiquitous than Beyond could have been in a space where there wasn't Nexus out at that point in time. And so it got to the level of ubiquity, and Foundry is also at a very, very high level of usage, as we even saw from the people who kickstarted our thing. A lot of them bought the Foundry add-on. So if you're not on those, then it's a lot harder. Also, the timing of everything, right? 5e was out for a while, for more time before the pandemic than Pathfinder 2nd was, and things got more virtual. Starting at that point in time, virtual tools became more adopted. It just became even more important than they were before.
And I agree with everything that you're saying. But when the pandemic started, we did a 5e game. We went 1 to 20. We did it over the course of the pandemic. I was a player. I wasn't running it. I was a player. We did Roll20 because Foundry wasn't even out yet, or it was like super beta. And we did the D&D Beyond with the Roll20 integration, right? So the poor GM had the physical books bought. They had to buy the books on Roll20. They had to buy the books on D&D Beyond. They bought the damn book 4 or 5 times because they had to buy multiple copies for players. It was a cash grab of epic proportions. But like beyond that, though, D&D Beyond didn't allow me, any integration. My DM made we made a house rule. My character did this thing, and I could attune more than, or whatever they call it in 5e. I could attune more than 3 items, right? That required attunement. And D&D Beyond just was like, nope, sorry. Like you can't do that, and so it was kind of like, and we used a couple third-party products, and it was kind of a pain in the butt to integrate actually with D&D Beyond. So I think that it makes sense to me that people would be very hesitant to sort of do this, but I find that D&D Beyond is just as difficult to work in some of this third-party stuff.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's not going to be in there
Yeah,
but
it's not.
because it's expensive, it doesn't have the level of ubiquity.
I see.
I think. So I think that
Okay.
there's just a lot of groups that don't use Beyond, and some that do. And so I feel like because of the timing, and because like Pathfinder Infinite didn't come out until after the pandemic was out, and so it became more virtual already. Path Builder was free and became like so ubiquitous, Path Builder and Foundry, that like probably like maybe even more groups use them than not.
Yeah,
by a significant amount, and that's probably not true of Beyond,
and that's
even though it's very popular.
And that's to say nothing of Archives of Nethys, right?
Oh yes, and like, that's never going to have third-party content on it because it's like the SRD for Pathfinder.
And I mean, I speak as someone who is very pro paper and pencil and books. I mean, I use Archives of Nethys a lot, and I used actually in the session that the group TPK'd in my Rise of the Rulers game, I threw in a skeletal monstrosity because it was like the big hit from our review video, and everybody on our Patreon really liked it. And I was like, okay, I had the PDF of Battles through Bestiary, and I had to sit there because I didn't have the Foundry add-on. I had to sit there and manually enter in, and that thing has like 97 abilities, guys. And I had to sit there and manually enter in all that stuff in a Foundry. And I thought, boy, if I had to do that more than once or twice, I probably just wouldn't use these monsters. So you guys included the Foundry integration. Brilliant. Most people do not.
Right. Yeah. And I'm here to say that if you are a third party and you want to get a lot of sales, like if you're small enough, you're doing a niche thing, obviously you don't have to worry about it. But if you want to make a bigger product, you probably should look into getting someone to do a good Foundry integration for you, and then set it at a price point that makes sense for people to buy it, because it will probably be worth it to do that.
Yeah, I'll give some advice on this. So first of all, please like if you like the video, if you like what you see. Everyone hit that little like button. And we have Cheese of Ages. Cheese of Ages, you're rocking it here. Even got even the collar of cheese here, $10. This is a bit off topic, but the talk of digital tools makes me wonder if Paizo has been way ahead of the curve with monthly adventure paths. It reminds me of subbing to Netflix for episodic content.
It's more of being a cycle, and the cycle went all the way back around, and Paizo was in that point.
I love adventure paths. That's all I run. Right before we even got on, we were talking about adventure paths. I have run about now it's probably a quarter of them. That's all I run. That's what my actual plays are, is adventure paths. I read them all. I'm writing adventure path. They are great. I think the adventure path concept, I've talked to Eric about it extensively. If you go back way to the early videos on the podcast, you can have interviews with me and Eric talking about how he invented the adventure path concept for Dungeon Magazine, how he designed Age of Worms and Shackled City. And funny thing, it was originally going to be 20 parts, and each part was going to be a level. Can you imagine? And then they're like, make it 12.
Sounds sweet to me.
Make it 12. And then he did 12. And now it's down to 6. And now even though, the 3 parts are actually selling the best. Those are the best.
I love
ones.
those. I love those. Honestly, I don't think I'll ever run another 1 through 26 session or 6 adventure AP again. I think it's really when hard. I want low level, I want it, give it to me. Let's get it done in half a year or whatever and change, or let's kick the tires. Let's go high level and let's go 11, 20. Let's start burning bright. I love it. I love the idea of that, by the way.
Well, and also just another thing for when you're doing something that's 3 parts, right? The people who are going to buy the second and the third part and the fourth and fifth and sixth of something that's a series are almost strictly a subset of the people who bought the ones before.
Yep.
And so therefore, if you do 3-parters, you do more that are the first part that aren't a subset. So it's better. Yeah. Because you're not, the number of people who will buy part 1 of your second 3-parter is way higher than the people who buy part 4 of your 6-parter.
Yeah.
Which is ironic because part 4 is usually the best part of a 6-part adventure. At least
So I have a question for you too. Something that we kind of talk a lot about in our Discord for our Patreon, which is we are starting like sort of which apparently is a fairly popular thing nowadays, but we're sort of starting like a MMO Western Marches kind of Braunstein-esque mega community game in our Discord using Foundry. We set up a server. We bought like 6 or 7 licenses so we can run like 7 or 8 games simultaneously, like 15 DMs running for like 40, 50 players.
It's like Iron GM or like the specials.
Not really.
You know what it is?
It's a little different.
It's our own. It's our own private. It's our own private Pathfinder Society, but it's a shared persistent world where we actually track where you are chronologically in like a master calendar. Anyways, one thing that came up a lot is, do you guys feel that, and it's because you're doing this differently with your products, how closely tied do you think Pathfinder is to Golarion and to the lore of Pathfinder, and that by creating a third-party product that doesn't exist inside the spec of Golarion, you're almost telling a subset of your audience who maybe has 5 or 6 Lost Omens books, you can't use those?
I don't necessarily see it that way for Battle Zoo. I see Battle Zoo Ancestors Dragons and Battle Zoo Bestiary as being something that could exist in the Lost Omens setting if you want. And it could exist in the Alucard setting, which is the default setting for Battle Zoo. And it could also exist in your home setting or whatever other place. The Forgotten Realms, if you're
because
running it in 5e.
5e is so barely tied to Forgotten Realms. It's like not even like close, right? Whereas I feel like Pathfinder 2nd edition feels more connected to Golarion.
Well, okay. I would say sort of. My opinion is that, and this was something we kept in mind, and trust me, I found out the hard way when when we originally had a Harrow deck and found out at the last second, it's like, oh, Harrow is owned by Paizo. You have to rename that to Living Divination deck, and I had to redo the art at the last second. So, you know, you can't tie to specific Paizo IPs, but I would say the things that always would come up is some of the planes, but those are easy to replace. The planes.
There's even a set replacement for them, like Purgatory for the Boneyard and Utopia for Access.
Most people play on their own worlds, so you know, I mean, they used to do this with the was it Living Greyhawk and the original Adventure Paths that they didn't have. They weren't allowed to use Greyhawk, so they would call it something else and be like the biggest city in the world. You know, they would use analogies, so they would do that. So that's easy. The thing that is tough to separate out is the gods, because the gods are heavily integrated into, and I've read all the Paizo books. They're heavily integrated into the Paizo books. It's heavy integrated into the spells, to the lore, to the background. That can be tough. But I also find that a lot of people, at least my friends, they play their own third-party stuff. They actually keep the gods because the gods are cool and there's good backstories with them. So
yeah, we kept the gods just because it was a lot easier than creating our own pantheon and our own list of domains and all that other stuff.
So I feel that's usually what happens, is that people will keep the gods and just replace everything else.
So I mean, I've talked to a lot of people who play, and it feels like that there's some people who only ever play Golarion, and there's some people who never play Golarion, and there's also a lot of people who sometimes play Golarion, and like they're all pretty significant groups of people. And so I think that you're right, Derik, that Pathfinder 2nd edition does a good job of feeling like it's very connected to Golarion in a way that like helps you feel included, and like if you want to go into Golarion, that it feels approachable and that you can. But I think that it also does a good job of, for the most part, though, if you pull one rule out, other than a few things like Steven said, like the gods, you can probably do it and you won't have any problem. Like Lost Omens Grand Bazaar is the one that we're doing a biased review of right now on Arcane Mark, including tonight at 7 p.m. Pacific. And we just do biased reviews that are clearly biased because of the fact that like my name is inside of that book and Linda's at Paizo still. And it's got a lot of like useful Golarion content that's in there. And it's not just like an ultimate equipment, like here's a bunch of items. Like it has a ton of personality, and you can just get a shopkeeper and plotline to throw into your game. And it's all in Absalom's Grand Bazaar. But first of all, you can pull one of these stores out and just put it anywhere in your home setting for the most part. Assuming your setting like has clockwork items, then you can take the clockwork store and it'll be fine. And it's even designed for that even in Golarion, so you can pull it to not be an Absalom if you want. And even if you didn't want to do that, you could take the items out of the store and you could throw them into your home game as well. So there's levels of granularity where you can pull things out from a lot of these books, even a Lost Omens, which is an example of the lore heavy books.
Right.
And you should be just fine in just about any setting. And I think that's true for many of them. Not all. Obviously, Lost Omens Legends is not going to give you, which is the book that's all about like personalities, interweaving plot lines with major NPCs. It's not going to give you a ton of content if you're not playing in Golarion. It's amazingly good if that's what you want, but it's very, very heavy on the connected lore.
Right. Well, then, so I'm curious, Stephen. So Mark has given his reasons, and we have apparently touched on some of them. So what is your sort of final thoughts or takes on why Paizo, or I should say Pathfinder 2, third party, does not seem to be as popular as 5e?
Basically because it's the same reason I've been saying, is that 5e is just so popular that if you get 0.01% of 5e, that can still be thousands of copies sold. And you know, if you look at Kickstarter is a good example. You know, I mean, it's my favorite Steve Jobs quote is, and this, if you ever see The Making of Pixar, back when Steve Jobs was still alive, it's a fascinating movie. It goes through the whole history of Pixar and how it was created. And he ends the movie by saying, it's like, you know, people think overnight successes happen overnight, but they don't. And it just shows just how much work it is. Like, this is now my full-time job. I have Mark on staff permanently, you know, like he works for me and for Battle Zoo full time. You know, this is what we do. This isn't just me hanging out and like doing this as a hobby.
Right. So, that's me.
Yeah. Right. But you know what I mean? Like this is our job. So like, oh, you guys are in Foundry and you guys are in, Wanderer's Guide and you guys are in, you know, you guys are in everything. It's like, yeah, because I have to spend a lot of time and effort and talking to people and making deals and working out with these people. So it is a lot of work to get, you know, my content into the same level that a Paizo would be. And, you know, when you can do that, then I was trying that people would see like, oh, you know, I knew this. I knew people would be very resistant to third-party content, but they're like, wow, this is, you know, number one thing people were saying, it's like, you have to be in Path Builder. I will not buy your book unless it's in Path Builder. I'm like, well, it's in Path Builder. I'm like, well, then I'll buy your book. And I'm like, well, there you go. You know, but it's important that you, for the Pathfinder community, that you have to be in the tools and you have to be easily accessible. You have to be in Foundry. And that's what we do. Plus, and this is no small thing, it's like the books have to look good. Like, you know, I don't think, I truly believe that you do not need to spend a fortune on art. I spend a fortune on art, but my day job is also working with artists for 30 years. So I can do this in my sleep. It's very easy for me to get very good art and work with people, and I enjoy it. It's not easy. This is a very hard part of the job, is getting art. It's extremely hard. I say, oh, it's really easy, but it's really, really hard. Well, it's easy for me, but it's very, very hard in general. And if you like, unless you know what you're doing, you can put out a very nice book with, you know, we talked about this last time. You can get clip art, you can get, you know, storyboard art. A lot of people do it, and no one knows the difference. Trust me, no one knows. And your book will be fine as long as it has good concepts and good content. And because that's what really matters in the long run. I will say it should be professionally laid out, and that's a big part of it as well. And again, I don't know if the percentages, like if we were able to look at the raw percentages, is like, is 5e really bigger than Pathfinder? The answer is maybe it's not. Maybe maybe 1% of everyone who plays Pathfinder buys third-party products, and 1% buys 5e. But 5e is just so gargantuan that it just looks bigger.
Right. Well, and that's kind of like been my thought process on all
That's
of this.
what we started with. That was the first thing we said.
Yeah.
I know,
it's
but that's
so much,
back to. But
I think it comes back to that sort of larger zeitgeist question, which is, does anybody really understand why 5e is as popular as it is? I'm not even knocking the system. It's not my favorite edition of D&D. That's a known factor. But I
know why.
There's almost like
last week.
But there's an element of it though that's almost like tulip mania, right? Like there's an element of it where it defies any explanation or logic to a certain extent.
I will tell you why. You want to hear?
I'm here to be educated.
Okay, here's the education. So do you know that 50% of American households have a Monopoly set in their closet? Did you know that?
Correct.
How many people play Monopoly?
None.
Exactly. There's a lot of people
game.
Right. It's a terrible game. One of the worst games ever.
Really not. Monopoly is not a good game.
It's not a good game. But people
5e is a much better game than Monopoly by a huge amount.
Well, you know what? Next time we're gonna play 5e Monopoly because it's out, by the way. So that's boy, that would not be.
So you're saying that there's right, and
it's
I've
part
seen
of the cultural zeitgeist, and I think a lot of people buy books, put them on the shelves, and don't read them or play.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. And I don't remember where I read this. It might have been like a Kotaku article or something, but they were talking about you are going to see people who start getting, D20 tattoos and you go, oh, like, are you super into D&D? And they go, no, I just think it's cool.
Right.
And it's like the same way that people get, kanji tattoos and they don't speak Japanese, or anything like that. They're like, I really like an anime. I got a D20 tattoo because I really like Critical Role. Do you play D&D? No, I don't. I've never played it ever. And I don't think I ever will. But I own a player's handbook and I own the white slipcover 175 version of Tasha's Hideous Laughter.
Like, when you were a kid, I'm older than both of you probably. I was around when first edition came out and I bought the Monster Manual and I would just sit there for hours just looking at that thing. And it was probably a couple of years before we started to play on a regular basis. But I still, I would just sit there looking at the monsters and reading it and just fantasizing about it. And I think, for a lot of people, especially kids, they will buy these books and just read them and think about it and, fantasize about it. And I think D&D is part of popular culture.
It's a huge brand.
It's beyond huge. It is Coca-Cola brand. Like I can go
Gargantuan.
Well, I can go up to anybody. People who are not geeks. I can go to anyone. I'm going to say, have you heard of Dungeons and Dragons? The answer is going to be yes. They've heard of it.
Yeah. Well, and you know this, Stephen, because you're such a Gen Con connoisseur.
Yes.
If you look at just the demographics of Gen Con over, say, the last 15 years, it's huge change, right? It all used to, right? It used to be mostly just middle-aged, predominantly white guys at Gen Con. And now it is a cornucopia of people. It's folks with their families. There's far greater female representation, far greater minority representation. And it really has sort of opened up, especially as a brand that is sort of built around this idea of inclusiveness and inclusivity.
Yeah, and that's actually something that WotC's been spending a lot of time on, and we've talked about that when 5.5 or 6.0 comes out. They're spending a lot of time cleaning up the brand and making it more inclusive. They're working a lot on the lore. They're not working on the rules and the crunch, which is a whole other subject. Right. And well, because they're trying to make it as inclusive and, Paizo was always really good at this. They were doing this years before Watts even was thinking about this, which is another reason why I like, Pathfinder so much. Is that, it's just, they're very aware of the setting and how it can be seen in a negative sense and how, they're making it like, look, this is fantasy. There's some negative parts to it, but not every goblin is bad. There are good goblins. Not every orc is bad. There's good orcs. And now WotC's coming around to that. But yeah, I remember this. I went to Icon, which is a big convention here in New York. And this is like 20 years ago, even longer, maybe 25 years ago. And I sat down to play a D&D game. And this was 3 or 3.5. And there was 2 women at the game with me, and like one woman at a D&D game 25 years ago was unheard of, let alone two.
Mm-hmm.
And they were great. They were fun. I had a great time playing with them. And I asked them, I said, I have to ask you, how'd you get into this? There's just, there's not a lot of women who play this. And they said, Harry Potter. And they said, yeah, Harry Potter got us into this. And Harry Potter is really responsible for a huge amount of, just fantasy. And then the Lord of the Rings movies.
Lord of the Rings movies, I was going to say.
Yeah, there was a lot of fantasy just happening one right after another. Because
it makes sense.
Fantasy was always it wasn't even the black sheep. It was the black sheep's black sheep. It was so far. I remember when Willow came out, and Willow, I was like, oh, Willow. No one saw Willow. Everyone hated Willow.
It's one of my top 3 favorite films of all time.
Willow's very underrated, although
very underrated.
A little too many kids in it for me, but
sure.
Yeah, but Mad Mardigan is awesome.
Yes.
And
fantasy was so niche that a lot of bookstores I would go to had a section called science fiction. It was not called science fiction / fantasy. It was called science fiction.
Yeah.
In which it had fantasy books, even though science fiction, if anything, is a subset of fantasy, and probably they should be considered separately. But if you don't, it's a subset of what is fantastical. Fantasy is clearly not a subset of science fiction.
I mean, I'll give you a great example at my local bookstore, my local Barnes and Noble. If you head over to the fantasy section, unfortunately, not any of the other RPGs, but all the 5e RPGs are just, cardboard slipcovers, and you have to take it up to the front to get it from behind the counter because so much theft of the 5e books that they had to move it. That and the dice they had to move behind the counter.
Yeah, I heard about that.
And so it's kind of crazy to think that like this is like one of their most stolen items, Whereas, like you said before, you were lucky if you went into like a Walden Books when you were a kid and you found a small little shelf or two of D&D products.
It's always funny how being the most stolen is something that people talk about. I remember I like there was like some person from a TV show who was like, I saw that ours was like one of the top 5 most pirated shows. I was really impressed or something like that. It's kind of hilarious. Yeah, but I think that everything Steven said is right about the brand being important. But I think also making the game so it is easier for a new player to pick up, even at the expense of depth in the game, is when you tie it to the brand is just a very smart move for getting not just the people who buy it and never do anything, but like Derik was saying, he would go to places that he didn't expect and see people playing D&D there. It's because they might buy it just to read it, but then because of the choices that were made, which costs depth and made it not as deep of option choice, but made it very, very easy for the players, not necessarily the GM, but the players to join a group. They might be like, no, I'm going to join a group. Let me see if I can find one. And it's super simple. So when you combine those, that was a smart synergy for marketing the game and for making it grow. That was a very intelligent model in my mind.
And also just look at popular culture. I mean, you look at the popular culture. I'm just going through in my head. You had Harry Potter came out. That was one of the biggest selling books ever in history. I mean, cannot undersell how big.
I've got my first edition Harry Potter's right here.
It's like, there's a lot of issues with her now, but you cannot underestimate how big it was.
Oh, it was
there were a lot of issues with kind of along.
I mean, what kind of
but it's sold
what kind of book? What kind of book had midnight releases? I went to a midnight release for Goblet of Fire. I went to a midnight release for
my little brother went to them too. I was always the person who was
I was the grown adult going to them.
Skeptic of Harry Potter in my family.
I have the weirdest. Well, I did the Harry Potter website for Scholastic, so. And I at the time was working with Scholastic a lot. I did a lot of their just their websites, and they had the North American rights, and only the first 2 books were out, and no one heard of it at that point. And I was like, "What's this Harry Potter?" and they're like, oh, it's really big, and we got the North American rights, so you're gonna make it was for the third book. And I remember I'm like, okay, I should buy these books and read them if I'm going to do the site. And I read the first book and I was like, wow, this is, pretty good. Then I read the second one. I was like, okay, this is really good. And then I actually bought from Amazon UK the third book because it wasn't out yet to read the third book. And I was like, this is really well written, very well designed world. Like, I saw how powerful it was going to be.
I will say this about Rowling is that she was an okay storyteller, but a fantastic world builder. Like
very
that
good.
is
and
definitely.
If you want to read the best reviews of her books, Stephen King, who by the way is like one of my favorite authors of all time.
He was a huge fan of Harry Potter, wasn't he?
He wrote the reviews for the New York Times and he explains in detail why her books work and what she did in the books to make them work. But back to the point is like that came out. Then you got Lord of the Rings. Amazing. Like, not only were these books were good. Like, it's like, oh, Harry Potter came out, incredible books. Lord of the Rings came out, amazing movies, fantastic movies. Then you have Game of Thrones. One of the biggest book, one of the biggest series in the history of the world. Like, these were cultural moments in fantasy. And then D&D, I think latched onto it because they were kind of dying with fourth edition. Fourth edition was in deep trouble. And then you get the coup de grace, Stranger Things, and them like literally centering their stories around D&D, and that was it. That was what like set it in stone.
Critical Role helped them a lot too. Mm-hmm. I'm not even convinced that D&D fourth edition was dying.
Well, they took it out of the stores.
I was not playing fourth edition at the time. My group stayed with 3.5. We played some fourth, but not mostly. But I don't think it was dying. I just think Hasbro had very high standards for what it wanted it to do, and the fourth edition was doing fine, but not Hasbro's standards. And so they pulled the plug. And after they pulled the plug, obviously it went down at that point.
Yeah, sure.
Because they had already pulled the plug. And to be fair, 5e did like way more, so they did figure out a way to sell better than 4e was selling.
We've always joked that the reason why they've never really had an aggressive 5e publishing schedule like they did with third edition or like they did with fourth edition is because we always kind of said jokingly, like, I don't even think they know why 5e is so popular, and they don't want to screw it up.
They don't. I can go into that. And when I was working with Blizzard, and this is when StarCraft like took over South Korea. And I would talk to them. I used to be a Diamond League
StarCraft player as well.
Well, there you go. And I would say, and we would say, it's like, why is StarCraft? Now, StarCraft in South Korea is like, it's not the same, but it was like a cultural. It was everywhere. Like you can't. It was everywhere. And I was like, why? And they would look at me and they say, we have no idea. We have no idea.
Just once. I remember one time that we were flying on like a Korea Airlines flight. I said, I wonder if there's going to be anything StarCraft related. My family were like, why are you even saying that? That's just a really random thing to say. And then our plane just had StarCraft just all over the entire plane.
That's awesome.
Just covered in StarCraft. Yeah. I said, see, it's a big deal.
Yeah. Well, keep in mind, and we've talked about this since, just go to our past shows, is that I went through like the, what is the next D&D going to be? And I went through all the quarterly reports from Hasbro, and you can
that was
see
good analysis,
right, of how they went from like, oh, what's this D&D WotC stuff, and now it's getting more and more to the point that now it is like the center of their quarterly reports. Like they make a point to talk about it, and now they have the movies coming out, and I mean they are really pushing this hard.
Well, and that's, I didn't get to participate in your conversation last time, but that's where I go to your point about Monopoly. There's a copy of Monopoly in everyone's house. Everyone agrees it's a garbage game, but Hasbro has never once tried to fix the rules because that's not what people buy Monopoly for. And that's my fear about D&D, which is, do they just go, this is more of a brand now, an IP,
it is
not a game. And we kind of, quite frankly, don't really care about the game.
I don't want to get into trouble, but I actually kind of agree.
I mean,
agree
you
with
kind of
Derek.
said that in the other episode that they don't want to kill the goose that laid the golden egg.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's probably going to be called D&D, just like 5e is called D&D. It's not called D&D 5e.
Yeah.
Right.
And it probably like won't kill off any of the things that feel like it's making it popular. So it might be pretty similar.
The only thing they could do at this point is kind of screw it up. So why mess with that? And people are so very happy with it. I mean, that's the other side of this whole. That's the other side of this.
Yeah,
well, that's the other side of this whole like third party thing, right? Is this argument about like, are 5e people too entrenched? Are they unwilling to leave and come to other games? And there's that whole idea of like, is Pathfinder just picking up? Is Pathfinder picking up new players, or is Pathfinder picking up basically disgruntled 5e players?
Well, I mean, the PF2 subreddit had a questionnaire. Like those questionnaires that you do online are really, really inaccurate because they're incredible sample size bias. They're opt-in, and you shouldn't trust them completely or even that much. But you can at least trust that for that community, for the people who opt in, that it's decent. And there was one that was like earlier on, and then one that was more recent. And the one that's more recent has way higher 5e. It was like, what was the last game that you played before this? And one of the options was nothing. This is my first game for PF2. And 5e grew a lot between two times that they did that, which doesn't tell us anything inclusive because of the non-scientificness of it, but is at least a data point.
So here, we'll finish it. We'll say another 15 minutes and then we'll finish
Ollie Wright had a question for us.
I know,
though.
Ollie Wright has a great question. Another 10 euro. Ollie's like the all-star here. Derek. Ooh, look at that. You're officially part of the crew now. How about Mark and Steven's perspective of your recent TPK? Which is funny. We were just talking about this before the stream.
We were talking about it right before the show, so we actually have, we know the context is that patrons
were paying to kill your characters.
To spin a wheel of pain until like 160 extra XP worth of enemies came in.
They were paying hundreds and hundreds of dollars.
That's correct.
To kill and grief your game.
What was the name of the Council of Darkness?
The Dark Council.
The Dark Council,
as they are known. So what's interesting about this is part of our experiment with our AP was to really include the chat and have a lot more, like, we used polls, YouTube chat polls, in order to like decide, and we represented this, by the way, as like Mukmurian or Karzug, like using their like sort of vast telepathic powers to sort of like bring down a smidgen of energy upon the heroes, right? Like one of the effects was called like Thessalonian Doom, and like dark energy rifts would start opening up as sort of like ancient energy of Thassalon was sort of channeled.
Rune Lords.
Yeah,
he's the Rune Lord of greed. It makes sense that getting hundreds of dollars.
That's exactly right. And the way that you entice him is with money. That's exactly right. Like even my symbol, the Wheel of Pain, was like Sihedron. And so, by spending money, you could bring down the Dark Lord's favor. And anyways, and so some of them were all very, fun and exciting, but the group had already suffered a death. And I had an encounter plan, which was a severe encounter for 4 players. They lost a party member, and the group decided to sort of, quote, do the heroic thing. And they said, we are going to go in and we're going to at least try to stop the giants from, this is at Hook Mountain. And we are going to at least try to destroy the forges that they are using to build arms and armor for the sort of building army of Mukmurian. And that's a severe encounter for 4 players, which means it's an extreme encounter for 3 PCs who also were pretty much down spells. And so they already entered that fight, and it already was pretty dicey, right? And then the Wheel of Pain spin donations started coming in, and the group got AoE, Frightened 2, no save. And then there were some attempts to keep the heroes alive by giving them hero points. And I should note, by the way, that in my game, hero points work very differently. Hero points in my game worked like the Juggernaut ability or Lightning Reflexes ability. When you spend a hero point in my game, it upgrades the success condition of a D20 roll by one category. So it lets you turn failure into a success and lets you turn a success into a critical success. Well, it's very powerful, obviously. And originally they were handed out very sporadically, and they were basically a form of like a Benny or a Fate point. Like it was a superhero point so that the heroes could kind of steal narrative control and say, no, like this is a moment where my character would succeed and I am going to succeed. Or this is a moment where my character would critical hit with the Searing Light spell that's heightened to 5 against a fiend. And I want to do all that damage. But when the chat could start paying for them to get the points, it was very, very like, I want to see this guy kick butt, and here's a bunch of money and you can make it happen. But they could not even withstand, because eventually the Wheel of Pain rolled the ultimate, which was the last call, which summoned 160 XP worth of reinforcements. So you had an extreme encounter and you added another extreme encounter. And guess what? Math in Pathfinder 2 is pretty tight. And they could not survive that.
So I don't know. I was saying, see, I've been playing with the same group for about 30 years.
Okay.
They run away and they have no qualms about running away. And they know. Like if they see it, they're like, we're going to lose. Leave. And they leave. You know, they're like, yeah, screw it. And that's, I think that's the problem, is that a lot of people, they gamify the system. A lot of people will be like, oh, this is an encounter and we should win because we're the players. Yep. And that's actually, before we even played last night, we spent an hour talking about Elden Ring. And oh my God, does my group like Elden Ring, because they're like, Elden Ring is how we play D&D and Pathfinder, is that you will get encounters that will kill you. And you will die, so you need to know to run away. So my guys run away all the time. So if they're like, oh, Wheel of Pain they would metagame. It's like, oh, Wheel of Pain that gave us 160 experience points worth of monsters. Leave, teleport, everyone jump into the bag of holding and someone run away quick. It's like they would be out of there so fast. And that's what would happen, at least with my group. But I don't understand why you TPK'd your main money stream. That was probably not the smartest idea.
That's a better question. That is definitely, that was more of an instance of sticking to my guns. I said, look, I have created this system and by God, I am going to hold to it. But you are correct. I did shoot myself in the foot there, but that's okay. There's other streams to be had. There's other games to be played. So
I guess so.
Listen, I'm a fun GM, Steve.
Yes.
I'm a fun GM, but I'm not necessarily the best business person. Okay.
Well, there you go.
People appreciated the candor, and that's why they donated to get that TPK. I guess so. I don't think I've ever TPK'd in a home game. I have killed a lot of characters, especially in 3.0, 3.5, PF1, where like there's a lot of rocket tag type or
Whale the Banshee
stuff where it was just like, oh yeah, they rolled badly, they're dead. That's just how it is.
I also ran
like in my Rise of the Rune Lords, I'm sure I killed more people than your TPK killed just over the course of the game. We had almost like 20 character deaths, like 7 of which were one player who would just keep getting himself killed, but it was never a TPK because, like Steven's group, we had someone who would run away. In this case, it was usually Linda, would dimension door out with like a few party members, and then just I almost feel like the NPCs at some point, or the future PCs who were joining the party should be just like, is this guy just killing people and taking their gear? Right. Because he keeps coming to recruit a few new people.
Am I just a red shirt?
Every few weeks he comes back to town trying to get more adventures that are slightly higher level, and it's just like, what's going on here, right? But my only TPK was actually in a Pathfinder Society game, and it was completely because of the opposite of what Steven said. There was a group, and they said that they were very, very experienced players, because I was like, this is a very hard adventure, and I've seen it before, and it has some issues. And they're like, we're very experienced. It was their first game with those characters, though.
Sure.
So they didn't have the Wand of Cure Light Wounds. This is Pathfinder Society First Edition. They didn't have any sustain. And basically what happened was there's one guy playing Amigas, and just every time a fight started, he said something that was just like the completely correct thing that everyone should have done. And his character had low charisma, and they were role playing it out well, that just like he had high end low charisma. He would be just like, oh, we're fighting this demon that's in a 5-foot wide hallway in a cloud of mist, and we're each going up to the demon one-on-one, fighting it in the mist, getting dropped, and having the next person go up. We should back up like 20 feet. There's an area that we can just fight it together. And then they just didn't. And that drained all of their healing. And so then at the end of the adventure, like the head demon comes out. He like infests bodies. So even though their group had not discovered any of the demonic stuff, they just wanted to leave. It is scripted that he assumes that they did figure it out and are going to get reinforcement, and they just bluffed him and he will attack. And he pops his worm head out of the body, which makes the body ruined, and he has to get a new body or his entire gig is up. And there's no reason for him to have done that, but the scenario says that he does. At which point he must have exactly one body. Like, I wanted to let them off, but obviously the demon needed a body to go into of one of the PCs because he blew the head off of the body that he was using. So there was one PC who was just obviously dead because they did something and they were low. And the Magus is like, let's get out of here. And he said that since before they were fighting. He's like, we could just leave. This guy can't even stop us. We're right near the exit. They were like, no, we'll fight him for a little while. So the one guy was unconscious. And Magus is like, we don't have time to go back in with low hit points to grab this guy's body. Just let that guy stay there and we'll just run. And I was going to, have the demon take the body, go into the body of that PC or whatever. They were like, no, we must get back.
We have to be heroes.
Yes, we must get back that body. And then that caused another person to drop. And like, oh, well, now we need to send more people in to get those back. And the Magus was just like, no. And eventually it came down to their cleric. So I was like, okay, he's out of all of his abilities because they were all daily. So he'll swing a quarter step at you and then you get away. She's like, all right. And so I rolled in front. It was a natural 20 for maximum damage.
That's great.
It was very embarrassing. I didn't want to get a TPK, but it was also like Steven said, they could have avoided it very easily by just listening to their Magus, who was a very tactical player.
Yeah, I'll quickly say something and then we'll go to the next question. Is that I my main group, I don't think I've ever TPK'd them, but I used to run Goodman Games tournament D&D for the DCC tournaments for a long time, and I would run the later rounds, and those guys would die. But because I also would run the later rounds, these guys, wow, I mean, I learned a lot. Like, they were
smart fellas,
superb players. Like,
yeah,
I've actually learned quite a bit and told my players how to do it, and they are. And also, actually, Seth, who's on my stream, he also ran these with us. I mean, I'm good friends with Order of the Amber Die, and they're always like, oh, we are the best players, and I'm like, I think we'd have to do a head-to-head, because I think my Edgewatch guys are tactical geniuses. I think it would be very interesting to see how this goes. And look, they're really good. I appreciate that. Survive.
I as someone who played Magic not just for fun, but I played it competitively. If I would have been successful, I would have tried to play it professionally. I appreciate that D&D is a game and that you can be skilled at it. I appreciate that Pathfinder is a game that you can be skilled at. I think that is something to be, encouraged and maybe even admired. And I get that this is a role-playing game and it's a collaborative game, and we're doing it, to have fun at our tables and tell stories and see these exciting moments unfurl. But when someone, it's like a Navy SEAL team with swords and fireballs, you're like, damn, that's impressive.
Yeah, actually, yesterday we were playing Agents of Edgewatch, and our monk, oh man, this was such a good episode yesterday, in that he went into a room and was attacked by 6 constructs simultaneously and went down in one round before he even got to go. And he's like, oh, well, I have orc ferocity. I'm like, no, you don't. You didn't go. You don't get to use your reaction. He's like, oh, crap. And so he went down. He was a dying 3. And then they brought him back. The healer brought him back. And he's like, all right. And he spent 10 minutes saying, okay, I can either crawl. He had that feat that lets you crawl at like your full speed.
Full speed, yeah.
He's like, but if I crawl, and they have attacks of opportunity, they can kill me on the way out because he was surrounded by 6. He goes,
that'll be 6 AOs.
But I have mobility. So if I stand up, and if that doesn't provoke, then I can use my mobility to get out. Because you can't.
But if it does, then it's equally problematic.
You can't use. Well, true, but he can't use mobility when crawling. He has to use.
Oh yeah, he can.
Oh, he can. No, he can't.
You're right. But standing up is equal. I don't think there's almost any abilities in the game where standing up is safer than crawling.
But he would have been attacked by less because of the way it looked. So
because they weren't all reaching him at that moment.
So if he stood up, he would only get like 2 attacks, which he might survive, as opposed to crawling with like everyone would attack him. And he's
also technically, if you crawled, your AC would be down by 2 because you'd be flat-footed, right? But if you stood, your AC would be full. So
exactly, and so he sat there for, and this is on the episode, like a good 5-10 minutes, like going through it all,
mathing it out,
and he ran out of hero points. He didn't have any hero points left, so he was in deep trouble. And he's like, you know what, he did the math. He's like, I'm gonna stand. He goes like, stand up. And they didn't have, it was this very specific trigger, and that because they're constructs, it's like, nope, you don't get attacked. And he's like right answer, and then he got out of there and he lived.
Definitely one of the reasons why I, again, was a big believer. I remember when I bought the core rulebook in 2019, I hadn't really read the beta playtest too much. I own the softcover book, but I didn't really read it. But I remember when I bought it, and I was talking, I think, to Jason or Logan, hell, Mark, it could have been you at the Gen Con booth. And one of the things I remember being told was this idea that, hey, we want the combat to be more dynamic. We're including this extra action. We want people moving around, and attacks of opportunity are definitely, it's not a universal thing anymore. It's really more for like that fighter, soldier, guardian type. And I love that more, and like I said, I've berated that. I've seen too many monsters get it now as a reaction.
It's true.
So
it's especially true when you have a curated bestiary that is just like, this is an entire bestiary. One team of a few people are going through it and can look to see if too many get it. Then you wind up not having too many in those. But when you're doing adventures and it's just like, this is a one-off adventure, we're going to put it out, we've got to do these monsters quickly, you wind up over the course of those adventures sometimes getting way more attacks of opportunity in them than you would expect.
So let's answer this question. By the way, Stephen Palmer says Kip Up is so good, bet that player wishes he had it. Yeah, the rogue had Kip Up. That's John, and John made fun of Chris because he's like, I bet you wish you had Kip Up right now. I can really
imagine that.
That's exactly what happened. Well, the funny thing is, he then was on difficult terrain, but then he used his feather token, and he's like, oh, pop the feather token, and that's no longer difficult terrain. He had he's one of these characters that we look at his sheet, and he has 80 potions, every contingency. Contingency.
Wait, is Chris a multi-class rogue?
No, he's a.
But he's a monk.
He's a monk,
but
and he
had
took
mobility
rogue. No, he took rogue too. He took rogue.
Yeah,
feats,
so he was multi-class.
And
I knew it because he had mobility.
Everything. He used everything to get out of that room. And I was like, it was such a good set. I'm like, this is why Pathfinder 2nd edition is so good, because it is so tactical, and you can use, and he used it all. And
you want to know the hilarious thing, Stephen?
What?
I've got the exact counterpoint to that to compare to Pathfinder 1st edition, because I'm still playing Iron Fang Invasion in 1st edition.
Yeah.
So a few weeks ago, our monk, I don't know how this happened, Stephen, but got surrounded by 6 constructs, separated by like a wall of force from everybody else who were fighting 6 other constructs.
Okay.
Our Unchained monk with jabbing style. And so what happened there was that our monk killed all 6 of the constructs.
Well, he got surprised.
Our monk killed all 6 of the constructs easily, while the rest of us had some issues because we had a lot of mages and they were all golems that were immune to magic.
Okay, he was like, here we go. He was by himself, and they're level 12, and
this is Pathfinder 2nd. The Pathfinder 1st version of that is the monk just kills the 6
Well, they had plus 30 to their initiative rolls, so they rolled like 49, and so that was, and they all went at the same time. So it was, it's like, yeah, you're dead, and that's exactly what happened. So Cheese of Ages for $5 road. Do you think that launching an adventure alongside with your third-party material debut adds the level of credibility? I feel like having one makes the endeavor seem like a bigger deal. The answer is maybe. I'm going to tell you that adventures and adventure paths sell the least, and they
might be like the Bard, where they don't sell that much on their own. What Cheese of Age is asking is, do they sell the whole package somehow?
I think they do, but oh my god, it's like not only do they not sell that great, but they're beyond the hardest thing to do. It's like okay, well, as I learned the hard way, it's like they are incredibly hard to do. They require gargantuan amounts of art, and you have to have. It's so hard to write an adventure.
I would say the monster part system is still probably a harder thing to do, but you had the right person for that, so it wound up working out.
I didn't have to do that.
Adventures, no matter who you have.
That. I just came up with the idea. You
adventures, no matter who you have, are going to be incredibly difficult.
Adventures are incredibly hard. I feel it helps flesh out your world, and for our world of Alakar, like the other thing we're doing is we're building our own god system, and that's even harder than adventures. Building out a Pantheon is hard, but it's awesome. We came out with the balance. The balance is fantastic, and I have Vanessa Hoskins writing it, and Vanessa is a superstar, and she is killing it. So she is doing an amazing job with the Pantheon. And that, be honest, that's the secret. You got to hire the right people. I mean, it sounds like, oh, of course you do. I'm like, well, you'd be amazed.
That's why if you're me and you can't afford anybody, you're just screwed. But you know,
well, I mean, the rates are just unfortunately very low. And well, I mean, maybe fortunately for you, but unfortunately for the writers, they're generally very low in the industry altogether. And I mean, Battle-Doom Roll Per Combat, our highest rates are quite significantly high. Like for something that's very, very challenging, like a 3-part interconnected adventure,
they're high.
That was at a rate that was higher than like Wizard's highest rate, which is higher than Paizo's highest rate. But even so, those rates are not like enormously high rates.
High.
Ours is pretty generous.
When you end up writing 65,000 words, they get up there. Trust me.
Hey, but you lucked out because you bought me as a full time for some of those.
I'm talking about the other ones.
Some of those 65,000 words, so you didn't have to pay the whole rate on them. But
true.
Yes, the other ones, yeah.
Yes, but I also get amazing that our art is. I mean, like the Battles of Bestiary, you know, like that's. I mean, I don't talk about numbers, but I mean. That was mid-5 figures, you know, like this is not like, oh, you know, some small book, like, you know, it was a major amount of money and effort went into it. But I also
art is like hundreds of dollars for a piece per piece. So if you've got 200 pages of monsters, there's going to be an art piece on every page.
Yeah.
I mean, we didn't have 200, but right? That's a lot of money.
It's a lot of money. Yeah, but you know, it goes, and to bring it all around to the beginning, if you have to spend $100 to $150 to $200 per piece of art, and you need 100 pieces of art, so you know it's like, okay, you're spending. We'll just average it out, $15,000 on art, and then you're spending $5,000 plus dollars. We'll just say $5,000 on you know, on the content, and then everything else you need to do, and blah blah blah. Before you know it, you're spending $25,000-$30,000 on your book. And it's like, okay, do we come out for Pathfinder or do we come out for 5e? Yep. What's the better chance of return on investment? 5e.
Yeah.
And you still spend the same 30,000 either way.
Right. Like you said, it's a sunk cost. And to that end, like you guys have tons of industry experience, some of the best in the industry writing for you for the system, with the connections, with Steven's extremely, extremely lengthy CV of connections and artists and design and layout, and you have the ins to go into Path Builder and all this other stuff, and you guys can sit there and look at your margins, and you can look at how much money you're making it. Think about producing that if you didn't have access to any of that.
I thought about that. That's why I didn't make the Dragon book on my own.
You're like that would be
Mark Seifter publishing Dragon book to try to kick off third party, and I didn't, because I was like, the amount of money I would spend just to even have one of each dragon, right? If it's 150 per, and I was going to do just the chromatics and the metallics, right? That's over $1,000, and I wasn't even convinced that
you could do that.
Even if I wrote it myself, that it would sell for thousands of dollars.
Well, Mark,
and it would be very art light if it only had one dragon of each of the 10.
Mark, what's the saying? How to make money in role playing games?
Oh well, yes. how do you make a small fortune in the tabletop role-playing industry?
You start with a large fortune.
Yes,
That's
the correct answer.
That is correct. And unfortunately, it's true. But you know what? I'm gonna, as someone I've started now 5 companies. I don't even know. 5 companies.
Do you count the Battle Zoo company that you didn't do anything with?
I do count it as a separate company because it is also it's still part of a larger company technically, but it is separate because of I won't get into this. This isn't a tax seminar, business seminar right now, but
that could be another topic.
I mean, totally
Shell corporation war.
Yeah, it's a shell corporation. I won't get into that, but it's true of all industries. Like that's such BS because one time I was looking into franchising. I mean, you got to spend a lot of money to get a franchise. Like you need to have money. That's why you need money to start these things. But the amount of initial capital investment in this day and age is so much smaller than it ever has been in history, actually.
That's true.
That you can do so much. I mean, look at, when they talk about, and then I'll really end it, is that the number one killer of technologies in history is the iPhone. And if you look at how many industries that thing killed, it killed photography, videos, it killed stream. It's like, think about all these devices you needed, and it's now in one device, and they're just gone. Like these industries, like photography and video camcorders, and there's just endless, and even Walkmans and displays, all that gone. Everything's gone because of one little piece of device, and it gave you that much power. Right now, I mean, think about you, Derik. Like, you do your whole show, it's you, and your show's great. You have a really nice, professionally well done show. I mean, how many people do that? You and you and you. I mean, right. It's amazing how much power we have to do professional things.
Yeah, no, it really is, and I mean, there's definitely a democratization of ideas, of availability, and it's just there is a deluge, to sort of to drink from the fire hose, but it can also be, like you said, it also could be down. It can have a big downside, and to your point about the iPhone too. It's like, yeah, well, the iPhone also in certain ways stifled a lot of creativity, right? It also drove out a lot of competitors, and it also made it harder for other people to get into the space. So I think there is a pitfall with all that promise as well.
So we've gone way too long, 2+ hours. This is crazy. This is like something.
But look
Derik
at how
does.
many people are engaging on.
Listen,
on
my streams.
Derik streams. Derik, I see Derik streams, and I'll be like, he started his stream 4 hours ago, and I'm like, oh, let's see, live. I'm like, he's still live.
Yeah, that's true. That is true.
I'm like, it's like, I guess he doesn't have a life. Oh,
that no. Checks out.
It's a session. It's a game session.
It is a game
that's
session.
Right. That's exactly right. I mean, do I get to talk with my friends and people that are cool on the internet about RPGs? Yeah, I'll do that all day. I mean, hell, that's why I go to Gen Con, right? Like, I just like to just find random people and say, hey, I'm going to talk to you about my character. And they're going to go, I'm actually legitimately interested. And then it's like, you go from there. So, no, but it is really interesting. And, certainly I think, we don't do anything like what you guys are doing, but I think the gold standard is definitely, again, our only A+ review from the channel so far has been Battle Zoo Bestiary.
That was the 5e version that got A+,
right now,
and the PF2 got an A.
That's true. That is
for the reasons that we were talking about here, right? You
said eggplants was one of them. I like that.
Yes,
one.
there was 5 eggplants, A+, and then Aaron, who was much delved really into the 5e book, just said, like, I've been looking at all this stuff on the on the DM's Guild, as well as the monster books, and it's like, this is just so much better. It's so much more interesting. It's so much more detailed. And so, it's a lot of money and it's a lot of work from your guys' end, but I think it paying off. It's just, and so maybe you'll be the lighthouse, the torch that guides the way to a third-party renaissance within the Pathfinder.
So. I think once you get a few big third parties, then that helps smaller third parties by a lot.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I think ultimately Mark's advice about, if you could figure out a way to make it financially viable, to figure out a way to hire someone to do some sort of at least Foundry integration, or somehow talk to the Path Builder, or Path Builder, or the Wanderer's Guide folks, or whatever. If you could figure out a way to get in there, I think you are just removing a massive hurdle for a lot of people.
If you make it easy for them to find it, I bet you're going to get double-digit percentages of all the people buying your main thing are going to buy your Foundry add-on. And so that's gonna add up, and you price it at an amount that's fair for them and that makes you back enough to pay for the person for Foundry. And then you will, even if you don't give yourself a profit at all on the Foundry stuff, you'll get it from more people buying your book because you had the Foundry thing.
Well, I always got crap when I used to say directly to Paizo, I said, you're not charging enough. I said these books should be $100. I'm sorry, they
well,
should
what?
be.
You're
so right about that. That's another topic.
That's another topic. You're in luck because I think the new D&D book is $60.
Yeah,
it's either 60 or 65.
These books per word cost less before inflation than the original box of D&D books.
Yep,
did per word before inflation, not even counting inflation.
These books are too cheap.
They almost are by page, but the old books were a little bit cheaper by page, but they had way fewer words per page. The art was black and white and much less luxurious. The paper was worse paper. It was just in a binder and stuff like that.
The paper. Wait till you see the physical book. The paper is amazing.
Paper is apparently, Steven said, even better than the Paizo paper, because there's one
way better.
There's one paper up that you can go that's cost twice as much, and Steven went with
multiple papers up. It wasn't one. It was way higher.
It's like Paizo's not going to make sense since it costs twice as much to make the book.
It's very expensive.
Paper stock is very important. Okay, the GMS of the paper is very, very important.
Well, you're gonna like ours because ours is 80.
Ours is the most expensive possible.
Paizo is 60 pounds. That's the cheapest. That's the thinnest paper you can use and have two-sided color printing. Ours is 80-pound recycled stock, super gloss. It is. You will actually see a difference. You actually will. One quick question, then we'll rack up. So, any update on the adventure for first Battle Zoo set? So, the artwork is 95% done.
It's so good.
Hundreds. And I mean, there are every single NPC, every single
it's so
monster
wild that Steven did this, because you never see it in a Paizo adventure. And all three of the people who wrote for it are major Paizo adventure developers, right? Yeah. We've got Ron Lundeen and Patrick Reaney, who are the two people who do the AP development, including the manager, and Linda Zeiss-Palmer, the manager for organized play and digital products development, right? And they were all like, Steven, you want an art brief for a piece of art for every NPC in the adventure? They were very surprised. And I even did the monsters that were already in Battle Zoo Bestiary, and they're like, wait, you already have it. Instead of a pickup or referencing Bestiary, he made a new version of them that would be appropriate for that encounter.
That is correct. And it is turning out to be about 200,000 words for level 1 to 11. So
I think anyone who bought it at the original price on the Kickstarter got an amazing steal because of the fact that it's like over twice as long.
$75, and they're like, ooh, that's kind of expensive. I'm like, well, you ain't seen this adventure. This ain't fooling around. Like, this is.
You didn't even expect it to be this.
These people clearly have never bought like a black and white art only like Necromancer or Frog God Games book that was like $150 or something like that. Like.
Oh yeah, this thing's full color too, and the art. Oh, the maps. Wait, oh my god, I got Blando to do the maps. Blando does all the maps for WotC, and he's also doing. This might not be public, but I don't care. He's doing the maps for the new Dragonlance stuff.
Yeah. So I think it's a well-known thing that Dragonlance is coming. Yeah. I mean, my irritation on this, by the way, is that people will complain about a $70 book, but then they'll go buy a $100 dice case from Wormwood.
Oh yeah.
And or like a $150 pen to match their work, or they'll buy some sort of hex dice tray system that costs them hundreds of dollars, and it's like, but the people who are making the game that you play with all this stuff, you're like, $60, that's a lot of money.
Slumbering
Derek,
Czar,
I would like to subscribe to your newsletter.
I have that book.
Like, I made a few long Twitter threads about the RPG industry's issues, and a lot of them, like, people were very positive and generally just agreed with them, but the one that was a little more contentious was where I talked about the fact that the books are just very underpriced, and people don't put a lot of value into a book, but they will. Yeah, if it has anything else, right? If it's got miniatures or terrain or a dice case or dice,
and this book,
get something physical and tangible.
I mean, Derek, actually, I'm very curious. I actually really want you to read it, because one of the things I did as a forever GM is that we have in here a lot of sidebars, and most importantly, the thing that no one did is I have a section in here is what happens if the PCs lose.
That's great.
We have that everywhere because it's always assumed the PCs win.
It very much is.
And I'm like, well, they're not going to always win. So what do you do? Like, how do you? Because it's as I say, people are like, oh, I don't like adventure paths because they're on rails. I'm like, it's called an adventure path. It's on a rail. Okay, get over it. Like, that's the point of it. So if you get off the rails, like, how do you get them back on? And we have ways to get them back onto the rails, and so that you're going with the path, and keep going. So I put like everything I ever wanted in a book in this book, which is also why normally it would be like 38,000 words per adventure, and now there's 65,000 words
right,
per adventure.
It's your pet project for sure.
Well, it's not even that. I just wanted to make sure it was as good as possible. And so back to the original question, 2 of the adventures are done. Linda's finishing up the 3rd one. Mark's going through the first adventure with a fine-tooth comb. As soon as
I'm looking at the 3rd one a little bit too as Linda's doing it, so that'll take way less time once it's in.
As soon as Dragon Book is out, I'm actually going to start doing layout next month. So this one's going to take a while. So I'm going to start now because I ain't doing this one in a week. This one's going to take at least, probably take about 6 to 8 weeks to lay out this book because it's gargantuan. So that has to come out because I can't keep doing this forever. And we got another Kickstarter coming that we need to come out. First, we have Battle Zoo, Best Scary, Strange, and Unusual. And then we got a secret project, which Derek might hate, but he might love. It's hard to say. I don't know what Derek likes. I don't know. What...
Derek doesn't know what Derek likes.
Well, there we go.
Derek's favorite RPGs include things like 4th edition D&D and like Monster Hearts. So
I know of Monster Hearts. I've never played it, but I know actually some of my players play that.
Powered by the Apocalypse teen supernatural romance.
Yes. Yes.
So
Patrick, Rob Pontius plays that on my show. I've heard quite a bit about it. Well, it's like a JRPG romance type game, I think, or something, isn't it? Like something like that.
Well, it's powered by the Apocalypse, so it's a very narrative type game. It's very like that respect. But anyways, yes, we got a lot of books. I got my Pathfinder 2 book. What do I got? I got the new 2D20 stuff from Modiphius. I've got 7th Sea 2nd edition over here.
You know what I just got? And then we'll finish. We're never gonna finish. Look, I got my One Ring. This book is
2nd edition
book.
Oh yeah, One Ring 2nd edition.
This is good.
It's on the way. And
I'm very critical of layouts. Excellent layout, beautiful layout, good paper, beautiful cover. I love this cover. I don't know what they use. They use like this, like I don't know what it is. It is a good book. I like this.
Yeah, I had their 5th edition version that Cubicle 7 did for 5e. And I thought it was really good, and I'm really interested to see what they do here. And I love Free League. I think they're producing some incredible stuff. So,
in fact, I have my shelf here is filled to the brim, and I'm getting another one. So there'll be a second shelf here behind me filled with my books. That's right. So real quick, tonight, both of you have shows. It's competing shows. Mark has a show and Derek.
The same time?
No, you're 7.
Is it 10 p.m. Eastern also?
No, mine's at 7 Eastern.
Oh.
Mine's at 7 Pacific. But yours goes over 4 hours, so it may still be.
It might not today because we went so long today. So
okay. So look, it's a day. You could have all of us all day. This is my show.
Yeah.
Then
if
you
you go to
Nights
of Last Call at 7 Eastern, 4 Pacific, and go to Arcane Mark at 10 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Pacific, and you could just
he's so happy every time he says his channel name. He's so happy with how clever that name is.
It's like Arcane Mark.
Arcane Mark's a great name.
It is.
It's a fantastic name. I love it.
I'm not always good at naming things, but sometimes I get it.
That's an A. I get that an A+. That's an actually really great name.
I give it 5 eggplants.
five eggplants. See, now it's the official way to rate things. Well, thank you very much, guys, for having me on. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And
you know what? We got to get you and Mark and no Nat.
Oh, man.
That might be too much.
That might be too much.
We get all 4 of us on. And
Listen,
Linda too. Oh, that would be too much.
I bow to the GOAT. No Nat has managed to get more subscribers than Paizo. So
No Nat is he's
props to him.
He's hit something that none of us know how to hit. He definitely
that is well said.
he tapped into that industry. He tapped into the well that we are still figuring out. All right, well, we'll be here again next week with another fun episode with some mysterious random guests. Who knows who it will be, and a weird topic. Otherwise, see you guys later. Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody. Thanks.